Chapter 11:24. When he got out of the car, Wu Zhuanliang was still confused. Home? There shouldn't be anyone left in her family. Back then, old Luo Tua Pando was old Pan's younger brother. At that time, he was working in Spring City. Old Luo asked him to help recruit a few graduate students who could work nearby. I felt that it was tough for Wu Jun to study alone in Spring City, so I spoke up for her. Yes, it's Professor Panda. Lil Wu and I were recruited in the same batch as him. Lil Wu is the youngest in this batch. Dr. Wang was the first to get out of the car. He breathed in the slightly hot and dry air of the wilderness and felt that the pressure on him had lessened a little. His body movements became a lot livelier, and he nodded like he was pounding garlic. When it was Wu Zhuanliang's turn, he refused Tang Yi's support. When Luo Nan took over, he didn't refuse, but he still put on a vigorous posture. He even jumped a little at the end. At the same time, he did not stop talking. At that time, I was also thinking that Wu Jun's personality was relatively weak, and she would not be able to come up with anything on her own. She might as well borrow old Luo's name to train herself. In the end, she really dived headfirst into it. It's just that your Luo family has infected her with mysteriousness. She didn't even say anything about that project of hers. It was old Luo who mentioned it earlier, that it was an ecological network at the genetic level aimed at the mutants' distributed aberration gene network ecology research, Professor Wang blurted out. It was rare for him to say the name so fluently. Luo Nan raised his eyebrows, but then he took the initiative to change the topic. Your joints and muscles are quite active. Luo Nan gave an appropriate evaluation. She usually takes care of herself properly. She soaks in the health pod quite a bit. Moreover, it should be targeted training. Wu Zhuanliang felt that Luo Nan's words were objective and that his vision was unique. Wu Zhuanliang felt quite comforted in his heart. City people do field work. Don't they have to put in a bit of effort? As the old man spoke, he stood still and looked around. This area was still very desolate, but within his field of vision, including the area under his feet, he could see faint traces of human activity. Occasionally, he could see edges and corners in the depths of the weeds, which were the remains of some buildings. This place was indeed in ruins, the kind that was completely destroyed. The most eye-catching thing in the vicinity was the vehicle and personnel that they had brought with them. Other than the armed vehicle that had transported them over, there were nearly 20 soldiers or military-style bodyguards on the other 2 armored vehicles. They were all equipped with exoskeletons, and there were even 4 deep blue walkers inside. They had already pulled up a cordon around them. Generally speaking, 1 or 2 grade B ability users would not dare to provoke this team. Luo Nan looked at Tang Yi. Your sponsor is quite generous. After all, it's a project that has a high chance of being selected as one of the Star Alliance's Millennium-focused topic. Furthermore, it's especially easy to use in terms of concept and size. Tang Yi pinched the brim of her hat and smiled subtly. Compared to the possible profits, the research funding is only a small amount. At this time, Lieutenant Colonel Chun walked over from the front of the car. Professor Wu, according to the data in the database, there are no longer any mutant species of B and above in the surrounding area. The closest mutant nest is 200 kilometers away, so it's basically safe. But it's best if we don't stay for too long. This is still an area where low-altitude predators frequently roam. Okay. Wu Zhuanliang agreed without meaning it. His gaze shifted from Luo Nan's face to Dr. Wang. We don't have any concept of this place. We'll leave the rest to you. It's been a few years since I've been here. I definitely remember the way. Right now, Dr. Wang was practically the focus of everyone's attention. He couldn't help but be a bit nervous. He subconsciously found an excuse for himself, but soon he made another statement under Luo Nan's gaze. He gestured with his hand as he spoke, inviting the group of people to move forward. There's actually quite a distance between this place and the original core area of the laboratory. What we see before us is just a defensive bunker from back then. Half of it is above ground and the other half is underground. The laboratory is completely underground, so the damage caused by the earthquake was extremely severe. Luo Nan didn't understand, so he asked, "Why is it underground? There's a natural karst cave there." "But wouldn't that be even more dangerous? The danger level of mutants will be even higher in a humid environment with little light or even no light." Dr. Wang was speechless. Luckily, Luo Nan didn't delve too deeply into the matter. The group of people continued forward. The outer cordon also moved along with them. There were also 3 armed vehicles, causing quite a clamor in the wasteland. Luo Nan cast his gaze over, but he didn't say anything in the end. However, Lieutenant Colonel Chun, who had been paying attention to the changes in Luo Nan's expression, immediately pulled on Captain Chow's arm. He exchanged a few glances with Captain Cho. Perhaps there was also internal communication. In short, Captain Cho hesitated for a few seconds before giving the order to have the armed vehicles stand by. Only the security personnel followed. Without the rumbling of machinery, the surrounding environment suddenly became much quieter. It was to the extent that Dr. Wang's voice became all the clearer. Since he was stumped by the question just now, he did his best to change the topic to a direction he was good at while acting as a tour guide. The vast majority of our group of people participate in the distributed gene project. We differentiate and separate mutant genes, determine their growing environment, and think of ways to make them live together. It's similar to mulling over a microscopic ecosphere. According to Dean Luo's words, structure is the most important thing. Whether it's the structure of the ecological food chain or the structure of the physical bearing space environment. Dr. Wang's words became more and more fluent when he spoke of familiar technical fields. Back in the laboratory, we were mainly in charge of the design of the food chain. Little Wu was mainly in charge of designing an idealized coexistence environment. Both sides worked hard together to ensure that they were able to complete a cyclic dynamic gene competition map in a continuous spacetime environment. They used this to compare the nature and evolutionary trends of the various mutant genes that appeared in the wilderness. They wanted to see which ones were stronger and which ones were weaker. They wanted to see whether or not they were in line with the actual environment of the mutant species in the wilderness. On the other hand, they wanted to find an ideal genetic coding sequence. Those who dabble in biology are basically pursuing these things. Wu Zunliang gave a brief evaluation. Then he looked pensive. "I've seen your thesis online. Indeed, a considerable portion of it is in the field of gene competition. Even though it's been over a decade, it's still quite insightful looking at it now." Dr. Wang could only say, "I'm ashamed." At this time, he was already unable to stop himself. He continued to speak emotionally. "For the sake of enriching the gene pool, we've really had many dealings with mutants over the years. All kinds of experiments, especially the genetic samples of some powerful mutants. The laboratory has no way of collecting them. It's especially troublesome to go through official channels. We can only entrust it to the wilderness hunters and tribes. We have to spend large sums of money every year. There were several times when I thought that the laboratory wouldn't be able to support itself, but in the end, we didn't fall because of money. Instead, we fell because of other messy matters." Wu Zunliang sighed. He wanted to say a few more words, but it was dull and tasteless. The group had already walked over 200 meters in by now. Lieutenant Colonel Chun dutifully informed them, "There's a collapsed area up ahead. For the sake of safety, it's better to maintain a certain distance." Dr. Wang also agreed. "The structure of the collapsed area is unstable." "Oh, actually, that area used to be one of the safe areas of the laboratory. It was Dr. Bu's time. It suffered an impact and became relatively weak. It collapsed the most severely during the earthquake." Luo Nan turned to look at him. "Is it there?" Actually, it's a bit to the side. Dr. Wang did his best to organize his words. In the year 80, the laboratory had already been captured. Everyone was hiding in a safe house. In the end, they were threatened by those people outside with explosions. It seems that there were mutants that could travel through the soil and so on. It was a complete mess. The collapsed area was the area that suffered the heaviest damage back then. Everyone was in a state of panic for the next few years. Their finances were strained, so they never had time to repair it. Dr. Wang didn't describe the situation back then clearly, aside from becoming long-winded due to his nervousness. He didn't even know as much as Luo Nan did from the data. However, it was this lively mood that drew in a feeling of immersion that was hard to embody with the cold numbers in the manuscript. Luo Nan's gaze stopped on Dr. Wang's face. Perhaps it was because of his gaze that Dr. Wang was unable to continue. It's probably because of this reason. Luo Nan pursed his lips slightly. Dr. Wang, you know that I don't really care about why this place has become like this. If it was possible, I would like to hear more about the matters concerning my mother. It's like this. Dr. Bo really lived in seclusion back then. The laboratory's environment wasn't too suitable for pregnant women, so we didn't see her often. In fact, if it wasn't for the accident, I heard that Dr. Bo would have been transferred to Spring City to have a miscarriage. Why didn't she go earlier to have a miscarriage? Why did the accident happen? Dr. Wang was stumped. A low and hoarse voice rang out in front of the group of people during this awkward moment. It overflowed the security personnel's warning line and was clearly transmitted. Why are there so many whys? If you really want to find a reason, it's nothing more than the terrible curiosity of your Luo family. It brought out bad luck, trouble, and calamity. It infected her and destroyed her. That's all. The security personnel on the warning line and their equipped exoskeletons, including the 4 deep blue walkers, only responded with an alarm after the voice rang out. The 3 armored vehicles that were lagging behind started up accordingly and came whistling over. However, the person who caused all of this did not make any further move. Earlier, he had walked up from the entrance of the collapsed area as if he was walking up a staircase. He stood at the edge of the area, wearing the lab coat that was not buttoned up. The corner of his coat was swaying along with the hot and dry air of the wilderness. At first glance, it looked like the staff who stayed behind to welcome the arrival of the guests. Wu Zuanliang was immediately blocked by Captain Cho, but the old man's eyes were very sharp, and he had already recognized the identity of the figure. Luo Yuan. Chapter 11:25. An unexpected character had appeared so openly in front of the warning line. Moreover, the alarm had only sounded after the other party had spoken. This was undoubtedly a humiliating failure for Captain Cho and the other security personnel. But Captain Cho didn't have the leisure to taste humiliation. He immediately made adjustments. Through the dynamo core implanted in his body, he commanded the security personnel at the front of the warning line to adjust their formation. He formed a link with the other 4 deep blue walkers in the formation to construct a formatted space together. It was also at this moment that Captain Chow's body, which was originally like an ordinary person's, began to bulge. The fine bone fiber structure flipped out of his muscles and soon formed a dense layer, forming a complicated and regular arrangement. There was also a dark blue reflection on the edge, as if it was a fish-scale armor made of steel. In reality, the inner layer of this armor did indeed have a large amount of traces of special strengthening. It was absolutely not the result of a simple mutation. Clearly, while Captain Cho was undergoing treatment in isolation, whether it was out of his own will or not, he had indeed received a considerable degree of research and modification, so much so that he could perform some kind of active mutation and achieve a deep integration with the Deep Blue platform. Captain Cho, can you assist our Foundation in doing some research later? Captain Chow's expression was mostly hidden under the scale armor. Moreover, He was facing straight ahead. No changes could be seen. On the other side, Lieutenant Colonel Chen couldn't help but turn his head. He just happened to see Luo Nan, who had been supporting Wu Zunliang as a polite junior. Luo Nan withdrew his hand and went straight ahead. There was even a bit of a smile on his face as he passed by Captain Cho. He gave the former a slight nod. Perhaps it was an illusion. But in any case, from Lieutenant Colonel Chen's point of view, Luo Nan wasn't the least bit surprised by this unexpected situation. Moreover, Captain Cho and Lieutenant Colonel Chen didn't have the right to stop him if he wanted to go forward. Only Wu Zunliang sensed that the atmosphere wasn't right. He raised his voice and shouted, "Luo Nan!" It was also at this moment that the two names that came out of his mouth looked at each other across the warning line. Compared to Luo Yuan's preemptive show of strength, Luo Nan's observation was more meticulous. Or perhaps it could be said that he was a bit more brazen. He sized up the person in front of him from head to toe, especially the person's obviously old clothes. Several seconds later, Luo Nan spoke with an admiring tone. "It's really amazing to be able to find clothes to cover your body in this environment." Luo Yuan's gaze never left Luo Nan. When he heard Luo Nan's words, his overly thin cheeks twitched slightly. But in the end, he still responded indifferently. "After all, I've stayed here for a long time. It's normal for me to keep some clothes." The people around them were confused, but the two didn't seem to have any intention of explaining. Luo Nan turned his head around and nodded at the stupefied Dr. Wang. "It looks like a more suitable explanation has come uninvited." This. Dr. Wang did not know whether to respond or not. The muscles on Luo Yuan's cheeks twitched again, and he smiled coldly. "I don't want to say it again. Personal emotions can't be taken seriously. That's the truth. Are you flaunting your preposterous bigotry in front of me?" Luo Nan continued to walk forward, easily crossing the line of exoskeleton armor. The distance between him and Luo Yuan grew closer and closer. "Today you seem to be very happy to display the image of a frustrated and infatuated person in front of me. This isn't even as refreshing as last year's dimensional crossbow. Is it because I'm not so easy to kill now, so you might as well change your method? Are you preparing to disgust me to death?" Luo Yuan's smile seemed to deepen a bit. "You should be enduring the disgust and doing some unqualified but necessary things. Is this the rumored sociopath? Well, I'm not surprised." Luo Nan had already arrived at the edge of the caved-in area. The distance between him and Luo Yuan was no more than 3 meters. From his angle, he could already see the bumpy edges of the caved-in cavern wall, as well as the chaos at the bottom. Yes, there was also the remains of the lizard mutant that had just been possessed and transformed by Luo Yuan. Right now, only a few broken scales remained. This was also a cloned body produced by Luo Yuan's laboratory. It had to be said that Luo Yuan's technological route was compatible with Luo Yuan's ability. Luo Nan had prepared ahead of time, and the results were almost the same as Luo Nan's spatial shift. Only the heavens knew how many similar chess pieces Luo Yuan had planted over the years. What level had the production capacity of his laboratory reached? If Luo Nan wanted to get rid of Luo Yuan cleanly and efficiently, he would need to find the unchanging behind the myriad of transformations. All of this happened in a flash of thought. Luo Nan and Luo Yuan looked face to face again, and their eyes carried a bit of killing intent. As for Luo Yuan, the thoughts of his kind had not changed at all. It was just that in this place, in this environment, and in this atmosphere, everyone was more restrained. That was all. Luo Nan was now a bit sociopath. The evidence was that he had begun to seriously consider having a chat with Luo Yuan. At the very least, he wanted to collect some first-hand information for future preparations. "Mr. Luo Yuan, although I don't really understand this society, I know that when it comes to socializing, you need to be honest on the surface at the very least. You see, regarding the matters of the past, especially the matters related to my mother. So the people of the Luo family are really people who are willing to be scolded. Luo Nan's gaze continued to grow cold, and so did Luo Yuan. And at this time, Tang Yi suddenly spoke from behind the cordon. Her target was Lieutenant Colonel Chen, who was in a highly tense state. "Mr. Lieutenant Colonel, you're from Spring City, right? Were you still in school in the 80s? I went to military school." Lieutenant Colonel Chen was a qualified sociopath. He quickly reacted after receiving Tang Yi's signal. He successfully organized his word. "I was already in military school in the 80s. It was no different from entering the army." "So, you have an understanding of the wilderness back then?" "Yes. I didn't just attend classes. I also had patrol missions." Lieutenant Colonel Chen slowly got on the right track. He began to take the initiative to speak. It was much more chaotic than it is now. Not only were the mutants wreaking havoc, but there were also roaming bandit squads composed of vagrants. For a convoy like ours, we basically killed our way through 100 kilometers. Tang Yi entered the role of a supporting character. "It's understandable. I just calculated. The distance between the 100 Races laboratory and the nearest supply base is approximately 200 kilometers? It's more than that. The one we passed through was newly built in the year 93. The original base was 180 kilometers further back. It was very easy for mutants or vagrant bandits to cut off the road with such a distance back then." Lieutenant Colonel Chen thought of Luo Nan's previous question and was the first to come to a sudden realization. Also, the 80s were affected by several Type A mutants. The first half of the year was the bleeding season around Spring City. It was even more dangerous. Generally speaking, regular and necessary trips into the wilderness would have to wait until the second half of the year. This situation was only alleviated after the all-out counterattack in recent years and the elimination of the key sources of danger. The so-called bleeding season was similar to the rushing tide in coastal cities. They were both names for large-scale riots by the mutants in the wilderness. This explained why Bo Qingwen was clearly pregnant at the time. Why was she still in the wilderness? Of course, looking at it from another angle, the pregnancy was inappropriate. Luo Zhongheng could also be blamed for it. Luo Nan turned his head to look. His gaze passed through the array of exoskeleton armors and saw Tang Yi, the tallest of them all. Regardless of whether or not Tang Yi could see him, Luo Nan still smiled subconsciously. It was unknown what encouraged Dr. Wang at this time. He spoke in a weak voice. "Speaking of the bleeding season, I seem to remember a bit." Tang Yi continued to cooperate with him. "Is it related to the bleeding season?" "It's the surrounding tribes." Dr. Wang did his best to recall. Back then, the laboratory was able to stand over there. A good portion of it was because we got along well with the vagrant tribes next to us. Sometimes bandits would surround us, and everyone would help each other out. But the bleeding season that year was especially long. The tribes that had a good relationship with us were all hurt. Some of them were even forced to migrate to the northwest to avoid the agitated volcanic areas. Especially when the weather turned hot, which was in June, the laboratory received a lot of injured people. They were all from tribes that we were familiar with. Then, something happened a few days later. Luo Nan's extraordinary perception wasn't affected by the distance of a dozen meters. He could hear Dr. Wang's voice no matter how weak it was. As the information entered his mind, many fuzzy details gradually became clear. Suddenly, he thought of something and raised his voice to ask, "Dr. Wang, when the accident happened back then, this is the person next to me. Is he there?" Luo Yuan's gaze pierced over, but Luo Nan completely ignored him. The person on the warning line stammered a few times before finally responding vaguely, "He shouldn't be there." Only then did Luo Nan return Luo Yuan's gaze. "Then, why are you acting like he was there?" Luo Yuan was silent for 2 seconds. Then he suddenly laughed. "Yeah, I wasn't there. That damned old man of yours wasn't there. Luo Yuandao wasn't there either. All of us weren't there. So, Qingwen was all by herself. She was all alone there. His voice was still calm, but his arms suddenly swung out. He pointed at the collapsed cave entrance, at an area that ordinary people couldn't see. There, she made her life's choice. The last time. The stupidest time. She was even stupider than her choice of Luo Zhongheng. She only chose a lump of flesh. Before she closes her eyes, that thing has no meaning. The sound wave quickly dissipated above the ruins. Some of it crashed into the collapsed cave entrance, causing a weak echo. Luo Nan didn't retort. He stood at the edge of the cave entrance. He could vaguely feel the almost non-existent slight vibration beneath his feet. Soul strength, which was more remarkable, covered an even larger area. It captured even more details. It far surpassed the domain that the basic 5 senses of a human could reach. But Luo Nan still felt that there was a layer of separation here. Since he came from flesh and blood, then he returned with flesh and blood was the correct principle. Luo Nan gazed at the fuzzy and chaotic cave bottom. A second passed before he spoke softly. "Take me there to take a look. I'll have to trouble you, please." Chapter 11:26. Luo Yuan straightforwardly agreed to Luo Nan's request. It was so straightforward that Luo Nan suspected that Luo Yuan had come for this very reason. In comparison, persuading Professor Wu Zunliang to obediently stay outside the collapsed area took a bit more effort. The old professor wasn't stupid. Of course, he could see the high tension between Luo Nan and Luo Yuan. He was afraid that the two would go down and start a fight, causing trouble. Luo Yuan wanted to go down the well. Lieutenant Colonel Chen and Captain Cho tried to persuade him. In the end, Luo Nan walked back and comforted him. "Professor, don't worry. I won't do anything today." Tang Yi rolled her eyes at Luo Nan. She turned her head and said with a smile, "Teacher, don't worry about this. When immortals fight, mortals suffer. If this continues, the ones who will collapse will be Lieutenant Colonel Chen and the others." Wu Zunliang glared at her. "Immortals, my ass. What's so great about being an ability user? It's not like I haven't seen it before." Tang Yi's smile didn't change. In any case, once this membrane was pierced, some things would be easier to talk about. Wu Zunliang nodded at Luo Nan. He raised his voice and shouted at Luo Yuan, "You guys have great abilities. I can't control you guys. It's fine if you don't let me go down, but give me a view sharing. You guys need to remember that I also came with a mission from my family." "Okay, we'll do as you say." Luo Nan was the first to agree. Luo Yuan also bowed, tacitly agreeing. Luo Yuan's method of coming over was too rough. He didn't have any electronic equipment on him, so the view sharing was left to Luo Nan. The hexaear he wore was very good at doing this. After activating the function, Wu Zunliang didn't continue to nag. He just simply said through the sharing function, "Be careful." Luo Nan smiled at Wu Zunliang. He and Luo Yuan directly sank into the depths of the collapsed hole. As they quickly descended, the sunlight that shone in from the entrance of the cave also weakened rapidly. Soon, only a distorted and swaying shadow silhouette was left in the human's natural vision. The breathing that Wu Zunliang shared with him was clearly much heavier. For an old man who did not possess supernatural abilities, the experience of rapidly descending in a dark environment without any tools was still a little too stimulating. However, Wu Zunliang didn't know that what he was able to share with Luo Nan was merely an insignificant small portion of Luo Nan's entire level of perception. Even if it was a simulation carried out by an intelligent instrument with night vision capabilities, it wouldn't be able to display even a fraction of Luo Nan's perception. Whether it was Luo Nan or Luo Yuan, they wouldn't rely purely on their natural vision to capture and process information in this complex dark environment. At this moment, the range, the frequency, and the way they interfered with the material plane represented the breadth, depth, and precision of their senses. Their respective senses would clash and interfere with each other, especially when there was Luo Nan, a perception freak that covered the entire region. The two of them didn't say anything, but their contact and probing on the level of perception never stopped. Luo Yuan's senses Luo Yuan. Luo Yuan's Luo Nan, Luo Yuan's Luo Nan, Luan Nan, Luo I Luo, and Luo Yuan's Nan. Luo Yuan Nan. But Luo Yuan Nan. Luo Yuan's Luo Yuan had long ago. Luo Nan didn't do this on purpose. He spent most of his energy observing the external environment. He observed the special area where his mother lived and eventually died. However, Luo Yuan's power circulation pattern was too unique. The parasitic clone before his eyes didn't count for anything. It was connected to Luo Yuan. It was in existence like a relay satellite that was outside of the local spacetime environment. It was constantly moving in the dark side of spacetime. It was far too eye-catching. Its mode of existence and position were very vague. It was separated from the local spacetime by the fragmented isolation belt and the deep and distant polar domain. It was its natural cover. But Luo Nan could see it. He could see it more clearly than last year when he was hit by the dimensional crossbow. This was without a doubt the problem Luo Nan had pointed out through the mouth of the Horn Demon back in Format 70 Laboratory. The most valuable thing Luo Yuan, a former laboratory member, obtained in the Misty Labyrinth was very likely a large fragment. It was hidden in the depths of the endless Misty Labyrinth like a sandstorm. It followed Luo Yuan's will and maintained a close yet distant connection with the local spacetime of Earth. What Luo Nan was able to see was basically this. There didn't seem to be any substantial breakthroughs compared to before. But the most important thing was the details. Conclusive details. I can't calculate the spatial structure distribution of the distorted fragment from 2 points and 1 line right now. But if I have a few more examples, 10, maybe even fewer. The premise is that the trajectory isn't too complicated. Luo Nan felt that Luo Yuan would regret it in the future. Or it could be said that he would help Luo Yuan regret. Luo Yuan regretted carelessly exposing the connection between the parasitic clone and the plane of existence before him. The problem was, how did Luo Yuan know what level Luo Nan's current sensing mode was at? Even Luo Nan himself was still working hard to adapt. He was adapting to this wide-area sensing mode based on the magnetic mica. Ever since he successfully cultivated the first magnetic light on the jadeite light and planted the true seed, the true meaning of the magnetic mica began to grow without interruption. Nearly a month's time was enough for the larval form of the magnetic mica to expand once more. This wasn't just a simple expansion into outer space. It also included the local spacetime environment of Earth and the continuous infiltration of all neighboring planes. The situation in the deep blue world was a bit special. There was no obvious progress for the time being. But in the cloud world, and even in the extremely broken environment of the Misty Labyrinth, the magnetic mica's sensitivity and activity continued to increase. Currently, the only thing that limited Luo Nan's perceptual ability was the structure of his brain. Luo Nan was immortal in the end. His brain was wet inside his skull, and it wasn't like a multi-core supercomputer. It was impossible for him to casually absorb the incalculable flow of information on the level of a trillion at all times. There were even more chaotic and even unstructured data fragments. So he used the magnetic mica's sensing nature to synthesize distance, danger, focus, and many other conditions to comb and build a new sensing network. The magnetic mica's material foundation was already infinitely close to the microscopic level, and the carrier structure was hard to grasp. Luo Nan's overall ability to observe information on the macroscopic level had yet to recover to the peak state of the water vapor cloak. But the coverage of his sensing domain, his grasp of key information, his sensitivity to danger, and even the efficiency of his instantaneous interference were far greater than before. There was no need to even mention his future potential. Time is on my side. Luo Nan lowered his head, temporarily burying his killing intent against Luo Yuan. This wasn't forbearance. This was planning. His thoughts had completely returned to the plane of reality, but it was unavoidable for him to link up with the past. There was frequent interference on the sensing plane. Ever since they entered the collapsed hole, the two hadn't spoken to each other. From this point of view, Luo Yuan couldn't be considered a qualified commentator, but Luo Nan didn't mind. The longer he stayed in this dark space, the more information his multidimensional perception could absorb and reorganize, especially in a situation where Luo Yuan had already pointed out the direction. Luo Nan's tentacles of perception touched the target and the space that held the target a step earlier than his body. Frankly speaking, that place wasn't quite the same as what Luo Nan had imagined. In any case, Luo Nan and Luo Yuan continued to tread on mycelium, moss, stagnant water, and the bones of small animals as they headed in that direction. They passed through collapsed or half-collapsed passageways, as well as empty and dilapidated doorways. They traveled through the chaotic shadowy lines that they collectively constructed. If Luo Yuan was willing to speak, there should be many details worth recalling here. But even though he was silent, the fragments of information revealed in the chaos were still assembled and reconstructed in Luo Nan's mind. So much so that this dark and gloomy space seemed to gradually brighten up, returning to the appearance it once had 17 years ago. But when Luo Nan arrived at an area where most of the structure had collapsed and some parts were already submerged by underground water, he suddenly pressed the stop button. Only an ice-cold reality appeared before his eyes. Luo Yuan stopped walking, meaning, "We're here." Luo Nan didn't need to say much. He had already locked onto the only target within these ruins, the one that once bore Luo Nan's life, but also accelerated the stripping of his mother's life force. The health pod. The passage of time had already stripped away its original appearance. Even the supports beneath it had corroded away. It lay crookedly on the ground, half of it still soaking in the sewage. The pod's cover was sealed, and its integrity was fine. But the parts that were not wet were already covered in a thick layer of moss under the humid environment. The outline was a bit fuzzy. If one were to judge purely by their eyesight, it would be better to say that it was a rock that had fallen from the surrounding buildings rather than a health pod. Luo Nan's soul strength had carried out many rounds of probing before Luo Nan arrived. So he already knew that there was no nutrient fluid inside. It was empty and dry. Clearly, it had never been used since they abandoned the laboratory, or since Luo Nan was born. This thing didn't have a clear sense of existence, and it was very hard to naturally extend a special meaning. Even Luo Nan needed to decorate it with his memories and emotions. There was a bit of a difference. Comparatively speaking, the breathing of Professor Wu Zhuanliang that was shared with his ears had a more lifelike quality. "It's here. It's like this." Luo Yuan spoke for the first time since entering the collapsed cave. He was cold and direct. "You can try your best to examine your emotions and assign a so-called value to it. But that is nothing more than a play to move yourself. It is meaningless to the deceased. Are you ready to howl?" Luo Nan ignored him. He just knelt down on one knee, ignoring the puddles and filth on the ground. He slowly wiped away the thick moss on the surface, limiting it to a certain area. A few shallow and unnatural marks were carved on the surface of the health pod a few seconds later. "These are scratches?" From Luo Nan's perspective, the lower half of these marks was like a simple drawing of a smiling face. And above the smiling face were crisscrossed lines of unknown significance. There should be a pattern to them, but Luo Nan couldn't see it for the time being. "What is this?" Luo Nan asked subconsciously, but he didn't expect Luo Yuan to answer. But Luo Yuan still spoke a few seconds later. Last words. Qing Wen's last words. Chapter 11:27. In the darkness, Luo Yuan's voice was like the tip of a blade rubbing against the moss of the ruins. "These marks were smeared with blood when her remains were discovered. The bandits who broke in used a high-power electromagnetic bomb to cut off all communication between the inside and the outside. Aside from the self-operating life maintenance devices like the health pod, all the surrounding electronic devices were destroyed. She could only leave a message through this method. But not long after, the bloodstains dried and blurred. Luo Zhongheng used a knife to carve the original marks as a memento. So, this isn't first-hand information. Luo Nan took a deep breath. What's the meaning of this? How would I know? Luo Yuan's tone didn't sound like he was rejecting Luo Nan. Instead, it sounded like he was depressed and jealous. Luo Nan understood. Was it left for my dad? Luo Nan subconsciously curled his lip. Only then did he feel his facial muscles turn numb. It was hard to pull even the tiniest of movements. At the same time, his mind also turned numb. It was to the extent that even the most basic of imagination abilities were frozen. He wanted to replay the scene back then, but his mind was empty. In the end, Luo Nan just put down his other knee. He silently knelt before the remains of the health pod. He gazed deeply, making sure to brand these scratches into the depths of his memory. Gradually, his gaze became a bit empty. It passed through the scratches and the body of the pod to cast into an even deeper place. Luo Yuan saw that Luo Nan didn't move for a long time. He had no intention of respecting Luo Nan's feelings. He brought up an old topic and sneered. Are you really going to cry? Do you want me to step back so you can brew your emotions? Luo Nan didn't pay attention to him. He was like an inanimate sculpture. It would be perfect if he really was dead. Luo Yuan's thoughts spun in his mind. He didn't go so far as to forcefully pull Luo Nan up. He just stared at the back of the young man's head. He pondered the possibility of using the planar crossbow to completely destroy the young man's body and soul. He had to admit that he was the same as the vast majority of people in the world. He was finding it harder and harder to see through Luo Nan. Actually, he didn't see through Luo Nan clearly last year near the city square of Xia City. Otherwise, Luo Nan wouldn't have been able to escape alive. Even if it was a diversion scheme, it was the same. This was even more true now. At that time, he was still able to touch upon the exceptionally fragile boundary between Luo Nan's material and mental state. He could have attempted to obliterate Luo Nan's fleshly body and put an end to all troubles. So today, that border had almost disappeared. Even if he used his unique polar domain perspective to observe, all he could see was the intertwining and disorderly trajectories of the power, as well as the energy clouds that stimulated each other. The muscles on Luo Yuan's cheeks twitched slightly. This time, he was grinding his teeth unconsciously. The more he used clairvoyance, the more he was able to confirm that this kid Luo Nan was mixed and blended together with the material world, the polar domain of the abyss, and the ever-changing sea of consciousness. Even if this fusion wasn't complete, even the word fusion wasn't accurate enough. The so-called fusion could only prove that Luo Nan possessed an extremely powerful interference force towards the domains mentioned above. Even though he wasn't doing anything right now, his very existence had set off undulating waves in many domains. His true existence was hidden beneath these waves that interweaved and influenced each other. No matter what angle one looked at it from, all one could see was an incomplete silhouette. Only by synthesizing different observation angles and refining them could one capture Luo Nan's track. But this wasn't an exact answer. For example, even if this youth's body was clearly and plainly placed before one's eyes, one could reach out and touch it. But if one wanted to deal a fatal blow to Luo Nan, one would not just need to pierce through the polluted air of the laboratory ruins. One would need to do so on every plane that Luo Nan could instantly interfere with. Even if the offensive power of the planar crossbow was unparalleled under the heavens, with Luo Nan's current wide-area interference ability, would Luo Nan still be standing there when the planar crossbow pierced through the multifaceted interference waves of the polar domain of the abyss, the mental plane, and the material plane? It must be known that Luo Nan was a bastard proficient in teleportation. The sound of Luo Yuan grinding his teeth was a bit too clear in the extremely quiet environment. Luo Nan, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly opened his mouth. If you want to target me, design an assassination plan or something. Just do some thought experiments. It's best if you don't blindly use the real thing. The real thing that Luo Nan spoke of was obviously the massive spacetime fragment that the planar crossbow was entrusted to. Actually, Luo Nan's words could be interpreted the other way around. He hoped that Luo Yuan would be provoked and make a few more useless attempts. In this way, perhaps it wouldn't be long before Luo Nan could lock onto the location of the fragment and eliminate this hidden danger. Luo Yuan's eyes narrowed, but he didn't oppose Luo Nan with equal harshness. Instead, he maintained his silence. He noticed that the wide area, multi-layered chaotic interference effect clearly retracted as Luo Nan opened his mouth. It seemed that Luo Nan was exerting his strength before, but now it had returned to normal. It lost a portion of its tension, but it became a bit more gloomy. This undulation caused the surrounding space to slightly fluctuate. What was Luo Nan doing? Luo Yuan was silent in thought, but Luo Nan didn't let him go. After breaking the silence, Luo Nan no longer seemed to be immersed in the confusion of family and the past. He stood up, not caring that his clothes were already soaked in dirty water. He turned his head to look at Luo Yuan. Light gathered in his pupils amidst the darkness, and they flickered coldly. I've suddenly discovered that you always like to do unnecessary things. Is this the after-effect of being accustomed to being driven by delusions and emotions? Luo Yuan laughed hoarsely. This is the tone of someone who has been sick for a long time. No, I'm interrogating you. Luo Nan stepped on the dirty water under his feet and took 2 steps toward the health pod. His knees already touched the body of the pod. He leaned forward and reached out with his hand to touch the ruins of the wall that the tilted health pod was leaning against. A few raps rang out in the darkness. They were deep but not empty. They were solid. But Luo Nan was even more certain. When you were blindly gesticulating just now, didn't you notice that the structure here is more brittle? This is a collapsed area. You know that's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying that this place should be more brittle, especially behind the health pod. There's clearly a point of contact, but you've isolated it. You should understand what I mean. It's not a good habit to play riddles like an adult. I'm really sorry. Luo Nan's apology was directed at Professor Wu, who was outside. In the next second, Luo Nan turned off the shared view function. Then he took out a more straightforward expression. What I mean is that there's a point leading to the misty labyrinth nearby. At the very least, there used to be one. You also call it a labyrinth? You really are of the same lineage. Your naming standards are equally terrible. Luo Yuan answered casually. In the end, he leaned more towards the core. However, the entire project's official name is Cloak. Your grandfather has always insisted on it. Well, it sounds a bit better. There was a deeper meaning to it, but Luo Nan didn't want to be distracted by the name. He just said, if it were to develop naturally, the health pod would have long been swept into the cloak and taken away. Luo Yuan sneered as before. How can it be natural? It's completely a man-made design. It's my father. Yes, it's him. I only discovered later that he didn't have the ability to open up the passageway leading to the labyrinth. So I imitated Qing Wen's design and set up an ambush in the surroundings. I hoped that the power of time would continue to drive the labyrinth and eventually corrode an opening, sending this thing inside. Luo Yuan was calm and unperturbed. Maybe this is an experiment. Maybe it's just a simple ritual. But such an ominous thing obviously needs to scram as far away as possible. He raised his voice and heavily kicked out. The kick was still far from the health pod, but it splashed up a sky full of muddy water. It struck Luo Nan, but it was completely blocked by a barrier of nothingness. Luo Nan grew calmer and calmer. So, you imitated my mother's design and created interference? Combined with Dr. Wang's description, my mother's ashes really were sprinkled into the 70 format laboratory. In the cloak across from us? Of course, it was also possible that it was in the cloud world. Dr. Wang didn't have much understanding of the frontier laboratory on the plateau, but Luo Nan, who had already occupied that place, obviously understood what the most meaningful place was. Luo Yuan didn't speak. Luo Nan laughed. This actually wasn't some delightful information, but it was able to give a bit of symbolic comfort in the subtle subtleties of the human heart. After dispelling the misunderstanding, Luo Nan felt that Mr. Luo Zhongheng's work was quite good. Everything was able to be stopped at a point that Luo Nan could accept. In any case, it seemed that the daily connection between him and his mother had become even closer. Luo Yuan must have noticed the minute change in expression on Luo Nan's face. He hissed, "Sure enough, you're the same as Luo Zhongheng. You're both seemingly gentle and selfish ghosts. Could it be that the person in front of me isn't a paranoid person who forcefully pulls others into his dreams?" The direct and childish quarrel didn't continue. Luo Nan felt complex feelings towards this special equipment that had reconstructed the relationship between himself and his mother. Of course, the most fundamental reason was that Luo Nan and perhaps Luo Yuan didn't want to use Bo Qingwen's emotions as a bargaining chip in their endless struggle. Luo Nan just declared, "So be it with the health pod. You two's imitations are quite clumsy. You can let time make the choice in the future. However, you don't need to go to the 70 format laboratory in the future." "Is that your private property?" Actually, Luo Yuan might not be able to go right now, but he absolutely wouldn't lose in words. "Against an official member of the laboratory?" "Once," Luo Nan simply commented. Luo Yuan's gaze pierced through the darkness. "Are you refusing to negotiate, or are you trying to increase your bargaining chips?" "Negotiate? Sorry. Your paranoid persona is too successful. I almost believe in your nonsense. So in the future, I need to treat you like a professional gene dealer or a terrorist to be more suitable. Am I right?" "Up to you." Luo Yuan turned around and left through the dirty water. After a few steps, he suddenly turned his head. "I'm quite curious. Did you rely purely on your talent to get to where you are now? Or did your dead father leave you enough things? Or maybe he's giving you some pointers?" Luo Nan raised his eyes and looked at Luo Yuan. A moment later, he shrugged. "I roughly understand what's going on with you. People like you don't know how to live if they can't find their enemies. But what if they don't have any enemies? You can add drama to yourself, to others, or simply draw a target to torment. From beginning to end, the problem is, this world isn't what you think it is. What do you do?" Luo Yuan laughed softly. "You think you've seen through everything. You're quite similar to your grandfather right now. He used to be a lot more stylish." As he spoke, he took another step and disappeared into the darkness. Not long after, Luo Nan sensed the body, and it silently transformed into a paste of flesh and blood. "Hey, if you do this, I won't be able to explain it to Professor Wu. He might even think that I killed you here." Naturally, no one responded. Luo Nan turned around and faced the health pod once more. The smile on his face had already solidified there. It didn't change for a long time. Chapter 11:28. Rui Wen floated within the misty maze. The countless fine grains of sand in her surroundings continued to jump about. They didn't have a real trajectory, or perhaps they were just expanding and contracting, striking and repelling each other. These fragmented grains of sand inherited the initial force they received when they were torn apart from their relatively intact state. They also received the effects of countless forces that were of the same or close to the same source, resulting in astonishing complexity. Moreover, the local spacetime of Earth was infected with the support and interference of another set of construction rules. This complexity increased by an order of magnitude, and it continued to grow. There were no rules inherent to ordinary spacetime here, but fragments of similar rules interweaved with each other from time to time, transforming into countless possibilities. There was a peculiar beauty to the process of possibility, its germination and continuation. It was like the continuous spraying of paint on a canvas where not a bit of white could be seen. The flowers that bloomed and withered, constructed by countless coincidences, blossomed and withered in an instant. Of course, actual flowers didn't exist. Only people who truly possessed the corresponding talent and ability were able to glimpse the beautiful and splendid law of possibility. And if one wanted to find and lock onto the most valuable flower within these flowers that bloomed and withered in an instant, then conduct deeper research, not only did one need to possess an extremely strong observational ability, one also needed to have persevering patience, some interference abilities, and even the ability to control oneself. Only then would one's body and mind not be assimilated within this unique and endlessly flowing sea of flowers. Sometimes one would find it strenuous, but she would quickly get used to it. This was Wen's method of perception. One had been adapting to her own abilities ever since she had awakened through the altar frame that Luonan had created. After all, the speed at which her abilities expanded was astonishing. Her extraordinary power had continued to strengthen in the following months, including her long slumber. Moreover, there didn't seem to be a clear barrier or upper limit. Actually, she wasn't too clear on the nature of her own abilities. She didn't know whether or not she was making reasonable use of them. However, it was precisely under the influence of this ability that she had a unique vexation. Wen hadn't mentioned this to anyone. In fact, she wasn't too sure herself, but she seemed to prefer staying within the misty maze up until now. At the very least, this place was still in the midst of continuous changes. In the outside world, in a spacetime environment where the basic flow was limited, no matter how brilliant the colors were, they would wither in an extremely short period of time. No matter how complicated the branches were, they would also be erased in the end. What appeared in front of her was only a gray and silent river. Perhaps it would change its direction and shape from time to time, but no matter what, there was no end to it. Occasionally, a small number of shadows would struggle tenaciously in the river, swimming with her in the long river. Then, they would be extinguished and assimilated. As her abilities continued to grow, the colors withered and disappeared faster and faster, and the process of entering a state of deathly stillness also became shorter and shorter. But no matter what, the final result would be the deathly stillness of the ashes, the silent flowing but unfathomable chaos. She instinctively disliked the situation and had tried to interfere. She seemed to be able to make the people around her stay in the river for a longer time, but it was only an instant before everything returned to silence. In comparison, there were a few who did not need her interference. They struggled in the river of time and continued to exist for a longer time. Tenacious light and shadow would inevitably make her look at him in a new light. There was no doubt that Luonan was an extremely special one among the extremely small number of tenacious light and shadow. One was unable to see through the shadow he extended out to this day, and he had always drawn strength from it to strengthen himself, realizing rapid expansion. So much so that Luonan was often the one who traveled with her the longest in the long and dark river of constantly changing silhouettes and directions, even if he was warped and deformed many times, becoming unrecognizable. But it wasn't just this. Actually, Wen didn't need to find any reason. She just needed to see the result that appeared in the long and dark river of time. As long as the final shadow was Luonan, she would always feel a bit of comfort before entering the ultimate solitude. It should be even further, even further, even further. At this very moment, Wen's gaze pierced through the surrounding chaotic sea of flowers to gradually lock onto Luonan's location. Due to Luo Nan's special position in the structure of her perception, as well as his extraordinary sense of existence in the long and deathly still river, finding Luo Nan was much easier than locking onto any other target in the world. Soon Rui Wen confirmed that point. At the same time, she utilized the unrealized possibilities of the misty maze to draw a rough path ahead of time. Then she used a certain amount of interference power to erect a tunnel that led directly to that point. In the next second, Rui Wen was floating on the long and withered river of countless blooming light. She flowed downstream, and when she came to a stop, Luo Nan was right before her eyes. Just a bit off. Luo Nan and Rui Wen locked gazes at each other in this moment. Luo Nan's pupils slightly narrowed, and his gaze focused on Rui Wen's body. After a moment of astonishment, he laughed and waved his hand at Rui Wen. The two were close at hand, but there was a transparent glass-like barrier between them. From a specific spatial meaning, Luo Nan was inside and Rui Wen was outside. Oh my! I really shouldn't have chased away the true god and the others. Otherwise, just based on what happened just now, it would be the tempo of a horror movie. In the end, Rui Wen smoothly teleported inside. Her eyes drooped as she listened to Luo Nan's teasing. This was the 70 format laboratory. Luo Nan had just seized it back not too long ago. It was one of the most important assets and results of the Luo family. Every inch of the space that housed the laboratory was designed and constructed by Bo Qingwen back in the day. Bo Qingwen had used local materials and domain fragments to reassemble the laboratory. Though it didn't have the support of supernatural powers, it was still able to exist for a long time within the misty maze that didn't possess the complete laws and structure of spacetime. Just this alone was considered an outstanding construction work even when compared to the Heavenly Yuan Empire's configuration level, let alone on Earth. Luo Nan came here after leaving the 100 Races laboratory. This was outside of his plans, so the timing wasn't easy to grasp. Rui Wen came over to remind him not to forget to go home and eat. I remember. Luo Nan responded unhurriedly. Rui Wen looked at him. She kept flipping through the old notebook in her hands. Luo Nan had a lot of these things in his hands right now. Most of them were from the batch he had traded with the Horned Demons last time. These were all Luo Yuandao's many years of records and experiences. There was a lot of information, and he was still in the process of sorting them out. But recently, he had been carrying the notebook he had personally retrieved from the jadeite light by his side. There was very little meaningful information on it. Most of it was a jumbled mess of lines that seemed to be dream-walking. But these lines themselves contained. At the very least, they drew in a special power. Rui Wen swept her gaze over the seemingly meaningless lines on the page. Then she cast her gaze towards the endless sandstorm outside. I ran into Luo Yuan today. Yeah, you haven't really interacted with him. That fellow is quite troublesome. Of course he's even more annoying. Luo Nan habitually engaged in a one-sided chat with Rui Wen. He described today's encounter and poured out his thought. That fellow is annoying. His stomach is filled with a pile of secrets. It's going to rot, but he's still very stingy. He talks halfway and then he thinks of pricing. No, he's just trying to disgust me. Rui Wen withdrew her gaze from the outside world and stared quietly at Luo Nan. But the words he said today had a very strong purpose. He revealed some intentions of wanting to cooperate. But what kind of cooperation can I have with him? A mist labyrinth? Or genetic engineering? The former is more likely, but he should know that I won't spit on this matter. Luo Nan's hands continued to flip through the pages, but the corner of his lips gradually froze. Speaking of which, why do I feel like he's threatening me? He mentioned my grandfather. Speaking of which, the arrangements at the nursing center really can't block the planar crossbow. It'll be hard for me to react in time. Sure enough, it's safest to get rid of such a highly dangerous fellow in time. Rui Wen tilted her head slightly. Do we make our move now? Girls shouldn't easily shout about fighting and killing. Luo Nan rubbed Rui Wen's head again. Rui Wen lowered her head and let his palm fall on the warm crown of her head. Actually, there's one thing that I'm quite mindful of. Luo Nan was silent for a moment. Then he suddenly asked for her opinion. Oh Rui Wen, what's your first reaction when you hear this? He's still guiding you? Rui Wen thought seriously. Someone's teaching me? That person. Which one? It doesn't matter which one it is. Let's pick at the words. Both of them say still. This proves that this person has been maintaining contact with me all this time, right? This was how Rui Wen understood it, so she nodded. Then she saw that Luo Nan was looking at her. His eyes were bright and dark, and the hand pressing down on her head unconsciously increased in strength. Is Luo Yuan just saying this casually, or is he probing something? Is Luo Yuan suspicious, or is someone else suspicious? Is he grasping a clue that I don't know of? There are too many things I don't know. Rui Wen didn't quite understand the meaning of these words. She just knew that Luo Nan's heart was in turmoil right now. It was absolutely hard for him to calm down. His mouth chattered on and on without stopping for a moment. Though his guidance is completely wrong, Luo Yuan's words and his suspicions must have some other basis, right? If there really are some other clues in a certain corner of the world, then it proves that he's still active recently. Rui Wen keenly discovered that Luo Nan's target of reference had changed. Luo Nan's lips twitched. The him Luo Yuan is talking about. My father. Huh. Rui Wen was a bit surprised. Luo Nan's speech sped up. That's right. If he's alive, I want to see him. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse. If he's alive, not contacting me is his usual style. He should have his reasons. Just like back then. F***ck. Luo Nan smacked his forehead heavily with his hand as he spat out fragrant words. He simply pressed down without letting go. No. This won't do. I can't follow Luo Yuan's tempo. People shouldn't have too many unrealistic hopes. Am I right? This question added too many uncertainties and negatives, so much so that Rui Wen needed to spend quite a bit of time digesting it before she could truly understand Luo Nan's meaning. Luo Nan smacked his forehead once more before she could respond. Yes. We must calm down when it comes to these matters. We won't think about this. We won't think about it today no matter what. Self-hypnosis and self-limitation forced Luo Nan's thoughts into a more realistic domain. He gritted his teeth and changed the topic. We can first mull over more technical problems. For example, how to deal a fatal blow to Luo Yuan. After we dig out all of his secrets. Chapter 11:29. At this time, Rui Wen could clearly see how much willpower Luo Nan used in order to forcefully divert her attention from this matter. His words were tough, but he was clearly a bit absent-minded. Luo Yuan was not on the same level of importance as his biological father. Perhaps Rui Wen's expression was too worried, but Luo Nan took a deep breath and revealed a smile to her. Don't worry. My mind is very clear. Judging a person's life and death under the premise of being missing all year round is a huge project. Wanting to obtain an answer in a short amount of time is the same as searching for evidence in one's imagination. How can there be any results? We need to start from a more realistic point of view when we get back. I know what to do. But as he spoke, he changed the topic again. Of course, Rui Wen didn't remind him. She just listened quietly. Luo Nan's mouth grew more and more unstoppable. He used words to organize his thoughts and organize his emotions. You must know that my father's last message was left in the tree hole of the withered tree sandbar. From the message, I can be sure that Li Wei and his henchmen were about to kill their way over. My father didn't have any time to move at that time. So, if something were to happen, it could only happen in Xia City and its surroundings. I just looked up some information. President Ouyang was already an extraordinary at that time. The psychic wave network was already in its embryonic form. Perhaps he could provide some information. Also, I believe that my father won't allow himself to be captured without putting up a fight. He will stir up some noise no matter what. The surveillance from that time. The possibility of this being left behind is too small. But even if there isn't, the extra traces created in order to erase the traces are also clues. I will sort through these matters. First, I will cast a wide net. Then I will find important people and links to make breakthroughs. I won't be like a headless fly bumping around randomly. I won't let my emotions and delusions fly. Luonan spoke clearly and logically. His train of thought was clear and definite, but Rue Wen still noticed that he was flipping the pages of the notebook in his hand. But Luonan finally succeeded in changing the topic to this point. Come, let's consider the problem of Luo Yuan and the large-scale fragment he occupies. In a certain sense, he and we are neighbors. He relies on the key and password my parents gave him. I believe that even if he studied and explored the mist maze many years earlier than us, his understanding of it is still not as profound as ours. Otherwise, this world wouldn't be what it is right now. Rue Wen went, Actually, she didn't quite understand. What was the difference between Luonan's, this appearance, and Luonan's, that appearance? Would it make those mottled colors of life stay a little longer? Luonan chattered a few words. His mood seemed to have completely calmed down, and his tone became even more resolute. We definitely know more than Luo Yuan. If he wanted to pry into the core area, it would be very difficult to accurately aim without the external neuron. Without the soul cloak and the altar's spiderweb, he would not be able to withstand the impact of the torrent of information from the other side. He would not even have Luo Yuan. There's also the tree hole, the lens, and of course you, Rue Wen. That's right. Because of you, not only did we understand the basic structure of the mist maze, but we also gained a preliminary understanding of its changes. If the core area really is as dangerous as we've observed, then I don't believe that Luo Yuan can occupy a sufficiently weighty base there. Therefore, his fragment can only be in the periphery. Luonan made an even clearer judgment. According to our observations, the fragments outside the core area are mostly fragmented, but we can't rule out exceptions. Perhaps they were bounced out due to some sort of impact or disturbance in the core area in the past. It's just like the fragments with potential that you predicted. The periphery fragment is quite concealed, and it can be manipulated by Luo Yuan. Its corresponding nature might be that it possesses considerable mobility. Extrapolating from the situation of the planar crossbow firing, this is a possibility. It's like a spaceship traveling through the mist maze. Yes, it's a large tree-hole space. Of course, it might be much more complex and complete. Luonan didn't even need to make inferences about what sort of use a fragment drifting outside the core area could achieve. Rue Wen could find dozens to hundreds of functions, and all of them were quite threatening. Luonan muttered to himself, I don't know if Luo Yuan possesses the knowledge to fully utilize the domain fragment's configuration, but it's never wrong to be a bit careful. If we build a pseudoplane in the future, we should start construction near the core area. It's relatively safe. Only then can the possibility of leakage be reduced to a minimum. We can kill it first. Rue Wen emphasized this opinion once more. From her perspective, this was already a very insistent attitude. Luonan waved his hand. I really want to kill it right now, but this isn't a question of whether I want to or not. There are all sorts of troublesome matters right now. It's not worth it to take the initiative to waste a large amount of energy for the sake of a character whose standpoint isn't particularly clear. And with the concealment of the fragment's influence, killing it in local spacetime might not be a fatal blow. Even you, Rue Wen, would find it difficult to find that fellow in the misty maze. Am I right? Indeed, locking onto a target in a short period of time within the boundless and chaotic misty maze might be even more difficult than exploring the core area. However, she could work hard to do it. This was the most proactive and safest method. Even without mentioning the threat to the project, just the planar crossbow alone was one of the methods that could threaten Luo Nan's life the most. And in some special circumstances, the threat would be magnified by 10 times, 100 times. Luo Nan didn't know of Rui Wen's worries. He just followed his own train of thought upwards. So right now we're still waiting for that person to make a move. It doesn't matter if he makes a move against me, or if he makes a move against someone else. Every time he makes a move, information will be exposed. Once, twice, 3 times, 5 times. When that time comes, the difficulty of finding him will drop by several levels. What if he doesn't make a move from beginning to end? If he doesn't make a move, then he doesn't pose a threat. Why do we need to waste energy to kill him? Luo Nan felt himself to be extremely calm as he spoke to this point. His calm mind was even more active. He didn't just rely on passively taking a beating to find his train of thought. Thanks to you, Rui Wen, we have a partial understanding of the environment and changing trends of the misty maze. We have a better direction in our detection. Detection has always been our daily routine. Since this is the case, we should put this problem into our daily work to deal with. Luo Nan flipped through his notes, his train of thought becoming clearer and clearer. Since I have some memories and knowledge of the nature of the planar crossbow, as well as today's harvest, I might as well organize them a step further. I'll find a few key points to use as reference. Reference? Rui Wen was puzzled. What I'm saying is that we should write a program for these characteristics. We should also install a plugin for the tree hole and the lens. We should pay attention to gathering information in this aspect when we scan the misty maze. We can organize and analyze them later. It would be best if we can find a few high-priority suspicious points to compress his activity space. We should do our work in advance. It would be best if we can accomplish this. It's fine if he doesn't make a move, but if he does make a move, then don't give him the chance to make a move. Rui Wen thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. Luo Nan closed his notebook. Okay, let's go to the tree hole space. Let's ponder over how to extract the information from that fragment. Oh, but Rui Wen wanted to remind Luo Nan that it wasn't long until dinner time. But Luo Nan's mood clearly took a turn for the better at this time. Perhaps he was deliberately trying to mobilize her, even taking the initiative to propose. Come, Rui Wen. Let's have a race. Let's see who gets there first. Okay. I'll count. 3, 2, begin. Luo Nan's figure instantly disappeared. This was obviously a spatial shift, but he was unable to be like Rui Wen in the chaotic environment of the misty maze. It was impossible for him to be like Rui Wen and directly perform a resonant shuttle. The safest route was to first jump to the local spacetime. Then, he would use the Luo clan's sandwich domain to perform a second jump. There was an extra step in the chain. It was clear that there was no chance of victory. Rui Wen even had the leisure to sigh. She erected a bridge amidst the gorgeous sea of flowers. Her body and soul blended together as she teleported in an instant. Luo Nan flashed inside a second after Rui Wen stepped into the gray and white monotonous tree hole space. Oh my! You lost again? Yep. What do you want? Big brother will buy it for you. Rui Wen finally had the chance to say those words. You said you were eating dinner at home. Is it time yet? Luo Nan looked at his watch, then he laughed. Not yet. There's still a bit of time. Let's first see if we can make an embryonic form of the plugin. Then it would really be a bit too much. Rui Wen was able to see the foreordained future. Right now, Luo Nan had finally succeeded in stirring up his emotions. He spoke faster. Aside from this plugin, I still need to properly research another. Rui Wen. This. Luo Nan drew in the air in the manner of presenting a treasure. The trajectory appeared to be chaotic, but Rui Wen was able to recognize that this should be a fragment of a configuration. However, its evolutionary trend would always be interrupted at inappropriate times. Clearly, its function wasn't perfect, but it seemed that there was an external interface. She couldn't make out any more information. She could only cast her gaze over and wait for Luo Nan's explanation. This is my big discovery today. It's in that health pod. According to what Luo Yuan said, this was left behind by my mother. I feel that he wouldn't lie about this sort of matter. Luo Nan drew this fragment once more. You should be able to see that this is a kind of configuration. It's incomplete, but it's the kind of incomplete that comes after being split apart. It should be used in some sort of relatively complete configuration system. Let's go with this for the time being. Rue Wen tilted her head slightly. It has a specific use? That's exactly what I mean. Luo Nan turned around and walked inside the tree hole. He spoke as he walked. I'm not sure for now, but I have a premonition that the message my mother left behind in this manner should be highly related to the research of the laboratory back then. Wasn't the tree hole one of the key points of their research back then? The 70-format laboratory, the pincer-shaped corridors, one on each side, all of them in the form of tree holes. The husband and wife also cooperated and competed. There's nothing more suitable than this. This is what Luo Yuan told me. Luo Nan spoke of the secret information he had heard in the 70-format laboratory back then with the soul-fostering horn demon. Rue Wen wasn't too clear on this. She just followed silently. The two soon arrived at the core region of the second floor of the tree hole. They arrived before the star atlas of the mist labyrinth displayed by the lens. Luo Nan didn't look at the star atlas. He just walked in circles around them. He even extended his hand to touch the inner wall of the special material and structure. I went to the remains of the tree holes on both sides of the corridors when I was in the laboratory. The damage was probably too severe, so I didn't discover them. However, if they really are related to the tree holes, believe it or not, my old man will certainly use them in the subsequent designs, Rue Wen. So, I'm going to flip through the blueprints my old man left behind to see if there's a similar structure. Of course, there might be some deformations. Rue Wen thought for a bit. It'll take a lot of time. Considering the factor of the deformations in the subsequent designs, I'll need to comb through everything anew. I'll need a bit more time. Why do I feel like everything is piled up together? Oh, now that I think about it, Luo Yuan taking the initiative to jump out has stirred the situation more and more complicated. This bunch of bastards. They can't be thinking of using fatigue tactics, right? Reality seemed to want to nail Luo Nan's judgment to the wall. He was destined to have a life of toil in recent times. It wasn't even until the morning of the next day. In the wee hours of the morning, Rue Wen was still in her own room, earnestly researching the future trends of the mist labyrinth. She was trying to find even more definite and valuable information within that splendid sea of flowers. Emopeng, who lived downstairs, tiptoed up the stairs at this time to knock on Luo Nan's door. This action of his could not be hidden from anyone at all. Rue Wen was completely able to hear the true purpose of Emopeng's visit in the middle of the night. Dang 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 dang. The 10 Days in the Wilderness expansion has been released. New plot, new system, new characters. Nanster, you said you'd take me flying. Perhaps from Emopeng's perspective, this action of his was to help Luo Nan release the pressure. Rue Wen's foresight ability did not include the complex domain of social communication, so she was unable to comment. But in reality, it didn't take long for Rue Wen to hear Luo Nan's long sigh from within the room. Luo Nan's friend group on the psychic wave network was suddenly flooded with large amounts of information at nearly the same time. The hexaear vibrated, and all sorts of notification sounds rang out in the air. Rue Wen was able to sort out the general thread of information very quickly, even though everyone's words were a bit emotional. Among the pile of information, 10 Days in the Wilderness hardcore fan bamboo pole's ridicule was the most representative. I didn't know that the brains of the game's designers and planners were deformed. It wasn't my fault. But when I saw the evolved skill tree, I didn't uninstall it. I even clicked on it. I watched helplessly as their brains spat shit out of their holes. It splashed all over my face. This is simply the stupidest thing I've ever done in my entire life. Bamboo Pole's words were summarized in a single sentence. 10 Days in the Wilderness, this multi-platform game that had just undergone a new version update, had a demonic moth appear. Chapter 1130. Time flew by amidst the sudden outbreak of chaos. In the blink of an eye, it was morning again. Monday mornings were always particularly busy. Many people needed to regain their rhythm. Rui-Wen sat at the dining table for almost 5 minutes before Emopeng, with a pair of panda eyes, yawned and sat next to her under Madame Luo Shuqing's kind care. His already round face was obviously swollen. When he looked at the neatly arranged plates and the dishes that were even more orderly and soulless, he suddenly lost his spirit. He slumped on the table and groaned. "Why, old Mo? Where's my father? I urgently need a high-sugar, high-fat, high-protein diet." Madame Luo Shuqing replied with a smile. "Your father only slept 3 more hours than you did. He left home at 4 in the morning and is now working to support the family. Unlike a certain someone who wastes his time, money, and life," Emopeng tried to cover his ears with the table, but he could only block one side. "Caught overnight?" Emoya, who had to eat diet meals frequently due to the limitations of her industry, had a certain tolerance for the old Mo's environmentally friendly cuisine of the household artificial intelligence, especially when there was someone to gloat over. "I'm the victim." Emopeng hit the table with half his face, but he said weakly, "I really didn't want to stay overnight. It was Nanster who grabbed me and cleared the expansion in one night. He's biting the hand that feeds him. This kind of game should be slowly tasted and familiarized with the characters and data bit by bit. There's no experience in forcefully clearing the game." Emoya raised her eyebrows. "What a surprisingly good reason to indulge. If I let myself go, I'll fall asleep in his bed, okay? I won't be forced to clear the game by him and not even get a thank you in the end. Oh, how pitiful. It looks like I pulled you down too early." As Emopeng's mother, Madame Luo Shuqing still knew her son. She didn't really think of her son as a hopeless degenerate. She was just puzzled. Nanan isn't addicted to games? He's not playing games. Emopeng had no appetite and only wanted to express himself. Who plays games in the work area, takes notes, checks data, and holds conference calls. He's not even that serious when writing a thesis. 10 days in the wilderness. If I touch it again in 10 days, I'll chop off my hand. Sure, I'll buy some pork trotters for you in advance. Emoya saw through Emopeng's words with a glance. Then, she turned her gaze to the other side. 10 days in the wilderness. Rui-Wen, did you know? What happened? Rui-Wen thought it over very seriously, but it was truly rather difficult to describe the situation in concise terms. The sound of hurried footsteps rang out at this time. Luonan scuttled down the stairs. He didn't even stop by the dining table. He just hurried over and said, "I'm going out." Luo Shuqing raised her voice. "You're not eating? There's a meeting over there. Let's all go together. We won't starve." With that, he disappeared. Around the table, apart from Rui-Wen, the other 3 were all sighing, although their hearts were subtly different. Emoya continued asking, "Is there a problem with the new expansion pack?" Rui-Wen recalled the information she had received last night and nodded silently. As for what the problem was, she still couldn't say for the time being. Emoya kicked her brother with her long legs. "Hey, you've been playing all night. Other than the dark circles under your eyes, don't you have any useful information?" "I do have information, but I don't dare to ask if it's correct or not." Emopeng grunted twice, but he still struggled to get up under the gazes of his mother and sister. He did his best to recall. First of all, it's definitely the game settings. The new expansion pack released an entire series of heroes, as well as the corresponding evolutionary tree. It's related to controllable mutant new humans. This smell is a bit off when I carefully touch it. Breakfast had turned into a seminar at the last minute. Undoubtedly, it greatly affected the proper schedule. But of course, it was impossible to come up with an effective judgment and opinion in this sort of environment, let alone a feasible plan. In the end, everyone could only go to work and school. Today, it was Moya's turn to send Ruewan to school. Monday's especially congested traffic made it impossible to have a lightning-fast experience, even if one sat in Moya's red supercar. From Ruewan's perspective, this was undoubtedly an extremely inefficient action. But it was also an effort to extend the vividness of color. She didn't have any clear thoughts of rejecting color itself. But by choosing this method, the time spent researching the misty labyrinth and chaotic sea of flowers would inevitably be allocated to the city's traffic layer and the high-rise skyscrapers. It would be equally chaotic, but it would quickly turn gray matter and turn chaotic in the real world. Ruewan knew that what she saw was only the current conditions and the foundation of the known information. It was a process of rolling forward all the way to the end. In theory, every second would change, and every second could bring about entirely different result. But the reality was that the trend would never change even after watching 1,000 times. As for the details, those fleeting details were admittedly brilliant purple and brilliant red. But if one truly studied them in earnest, one would inevitably have a sort of meaningless doubt or self-awareness. Well, Ruewan wasn't too clear on what meaning was. But she had lived by Luonan's side for a long time. She had experienced the troubles that plagued Luonan at all times. It was as if an invisible whip was lashing him forward. She couldn't help but feel that wasting time like this was definitely wrong. The problem was that Luonan himself was currently in the same situation. From Ruewan's point of view, Luonan had similarly invested his limited energy into the details of the endless appearance, the branching, and the rapid decay into chaos. Perhaps this wasn't his original intention, but in this complex and confusing real world, there would always be factors like this, and that would affect him. For example, the sudden game expansion pack event. Actually, Ruewan didn't really understand why Luonan cared so much about this matter. She couldn't judge whether or not Luonan's methods were correct. This was because she couldn't eliminate the possibility of the tributary eventually becoming the mainstream, even though it would ultimately return to deathly stillness. Ruewan was confused, but the only target she was willing to use as a reference in most situations was Luonan. She hoped to be able to understand and imitate this pattern. Perhaps this would help her create a greater separation from the long river of deathly stillness. She wouldn't fuse with it too early and sink into the endless chaos. Ruewan instinctively didn't wish for this to happen, even though she couldn't find a clear dividing line right now. She couldn't tell if she was detached from the outside or if she herself was a part of this long river of deathly stillness. Was she observing the final destination of all things, or was it the occasional surging waves of the river intertwining with the real world and separating from it? Ruewan looked out the window, but she saw her own reflection in the glass. In the environment where the light inside and outside collided and flowed, and in the blurry mirror carrier, the image on it seemed to be wriggling and changing, as if it would peel off the shell at any time and jump out of it completely different. Her fingers touched the window as well as the shadow. The point of contact was slightly cold, just like the water vapor of the long, dead river, gently biting her fingertips. However, was she above or below the water? Aside from Luonan, Moya was the person in the family who was the most familiar with Ruewan. It was also because they were familiar with each other that they didn't intentionally disturb each other in this silent atmosphere. Most of the time, it was quiet in the car. Moya was also handling some of her own affairs during the autopilot period. She only spoke when they were about to reach the school. Look at how flustered Luonan has been these past few days. Don't add to his troubles in other areas. Ruewan looked away from her own mirror and turned to look at her. I'm talking about those messy matters on the internet. Cut them off when it's time. I'll talk to the company and BHD. If you run into those paparazzi or gossipy women at school, hide if you can. Strive to cool things down in these 2 days. Rue Wen pondered seriously for a moment. I'll just skip class. Then am I an accomplice or the main culprit? Rue Wen still lacked this sort of sensitivity. She didn't respond at all to Emoya's teasing. Her eyes drooped in silence, but her mind began to plan the goal of today's exploration. Emoya rolled her eyes. In the end, she didn't say anything. The car smoothly arrived at the school 5 minutes later. Sure enough, Rue Wen didn't go to the main campus after saying goodbye to Emoya. She directly boarded the self-moving conveyor belt and headed in the direction of the Northern Shore jungle. Actually, Rue Wen wanted to directly teleport to Gear's underground laboratory. However, she had truly become famous during this period of time. There were people staring at her practically every second she walked on campus. It was extremely difficult to find a suitable visual and psychological blind spot in this sort of environment. She could only spend a bit more time like a normal student. She transferred from the self-moving conveyor belt to the school's tram until she reached the outskirts of the Northern Shore jungle. But at this time, a normal student's direction of activity was certainly the opposite of hers. Rue Wen ignored the strange gazes she received along the way. She prepared to enter deep into the jungle and directly jump to the laboratory when the time came. A loudspeaker sounded from behind her at this time. Hey Luo Xiang, junior sister Rue Wen. The person in front of her first said Rue Wen's registered name at school, but he felt that it was too unfamiliar. He imitated Luo Nan's usual way of addressing her, using a more intimate form of address. The problem was that Rue Wen didn't turn her head at all. It was as if she didn't hear his greeting at all. She directly walked across the long river that cut through the forest, connecting the southern shore and the northern shore with the Nine Bend Bridge. The person behind her jumped off the sightseeing car and hurried 2 steps forward. His mouth didn't stop. Do you recognize me? I'm Au Quebec. We've met before. Rue Wen didn't remember. She continued to walk forward, and the fellow called OK kept up with her. He chattered endlessly next to her ear. Rue Wen, aren't you going to class at this time? Even though your behavior isn't too good, it's quite interesting when you do it. One of the most valuable things about the mystic arts is that it's interesting. Plus, you're quite mysterious. Rue Wen followed Emoya's teachings and maintained silence in front of the gossipy woman. But OK didn't have the slightest intention of restraining himself. You want to go to Gear? Have you eaten breakfast yet? The water chestnut cakes here are surprisingly authentic. I'll treat you. Oh my. OK subconsciously cried out. The reason was because he had just crossed the Nine Bend Bridge and stepped onto the northern shore paved with gravel and grass. There was a brown shadow that passed through the morning grass and trees that were still a bit damp. The brown shadow pierced out from the side and charged straight at him. OK nearly kicked it out. Luckily, he was able to see clearly who it was in the end. He staggered and stopped, but the fat and round fellow took over his position. He was no longer able to walk side by side with Rue Wen. The fellow that leapt out clearly occupied a good position, but he didn't dare to rub against Rue Wen's body. He just excitedly spun in circles beneath her feet. His long tail whipped against the mud, rocks, and grass, making popping sounds. This was, without a doubt, Jerry. OK often saw him in the society. He knew that he was Xie Juanping's adopted son, one of the group favorites in Luo Nan's circle of friends. He would drill in and out of the bosom of Luo Nan's extremely beautiful friends of the opposite sex, including Rue Wen. But what OK didn't know was that this little thing looked like a common muskrat in the jungle swamp area. In fact, it had a mysterious and complicated history. From what he knew so far, it had once undergone precise modifications by Luo Zhongheng. It had stored a large amount of critical information. Normally, it would do some cleaning work in the tree hole of the withered tree sandbar. It could be said that it was precisely because of Jerry's existence that the letter Luo Zhongheng left for Luonan, the building structure of the tree hole, and other information were perfectly preserved. Ever since that matter, this muskrat's position in Luonan's heart had changed. But Rui Wan, who was the first to introduce Jerry to Luonan, still had the same attitude towards this little thing. She didn't stop walking, and Jerry followed by her side in a well-behaved manner. Its fat body achieved a perfect blocking position within the narrow jungle path. It made it impossible for OK to walk side by side with Rui when no matter what. OK could only fall behind by a body's length. He raised his voice and did his best to strike up a conversation with Rui Wan. Speaking of which, you're not wasting your energy on your schoolwork. Are you really preparing to debut? Even though Mingtang culture's hype isn't that brilliant, I still believe in you. A girl with such boldness like yours will succeed in any field. In the entertainment circle, more people will be able to see and appreciate your beauty. That kind of boldness and mysterious beauty. When the time comes, I'll definitely be a fan of you. Yep. Actually, I'm a fan right now. OK didn't hesitate to use overflowing words of praise. He clearly expressed his family's attitude, but Rui Wan still didn't pay attention to him. OK furrowed his brows a bit, but he soon calmed down. This was how cool it was. Only a girl could enter his discerning eyes, right? Just like this, the two of them arrived at Gear. There weren't many people in Gear at this time. Some of them were freaks who were doing some inexplicable mysticism experiments and had forgotten the time. They simply stayed the night here. There were also some fellows who felt that the coffee and pastries here were delicious. They came to freeload for breakfast and enjoy the club's benefit. At times like this, bringing a female companion or something was the best atmosphere. But no matter which type it was, they weren't the same type as those little fellows from the South Bank who were in a hurry. Freedom to use their time freely and leisurely enjoy life was a right that only the seniors of the university department had. At this side of the entrance hall, the club's famous gossip lord, Chao Shanhai, belonged to the category of freeloading for breakfast and picking up girls. In the crook of his arm hung a pretty junior sister. At times like this, encountering an acquaintance was a sure way to show off. Chao Shanhai was in the elevator lobby on the first floor. He pulled over a few friends and discussed going to the casual booth to drink coffee and chat. At this time, he saw Rui Wan and OK walk in. Here Rui Wan's direction was correct. Her age was even more out of place. Not to mention, she had the club's vice president by her side. Holy crap! Chao Shanhai's eyelids twitched a few times when he saw Rui Wan. He subconsciously averted his gaze and couldn't help but think of Rui Wan's older brother, Luonan, who had given him several months of nightmares. At the end of last year, he had suffered quite a few losses at Luonan's hands because of his big mouth. Especially at the grand banquet. Tears and snot streamed down his face as he sat on the ground and begged for mercy. He even sold out his old friend Huang Bingjin in passing. It could be said that he had lost all faith. He certainly hated Luonan from the bottom of his heart, but as for revenge, screw it. Back then, Luonan's assistant, dragging him by the neck on the ground, had the rank of captain. Not to mention that after the incident, he and the elders of his family had been specially taken care of by the big shots. Revenge against a fellow with this kind of background? What was he going to do with his head? Chao Shanhai's momentum was seized, but his mouth was always ahead of his brain. He bypassed Rui Wan and said something else. OK's taste changes quite quickly. Everyone in the circle of the Divine Research Society knew that Vice President OK was a standard age control. Whether it was the president, Tang Yi, or the beautiful agent, Fei Jin, who had taken a leave of absence from school due to illness, they were all his favorites. And this young man, who still had some time left in his freshman career, had never denied this point. He constantly used his status and resources as vice president to create opportunities for himself and create public opinion. The results were not to be discussed, but this persona was established. But today's scene, the circle of people looked at Quebec. He had already entered the elevator with Rue 1, but he retreated with his hands raised when the alarm went off. This elevator was installed later on. It directly connected to Luonan's underground laboratory. OK really didn't have the authority. In comparison, the muskrat wagging its head and wagging its tail was more impressive than Quebec. The people standing here with Chow Shanhai were all people of the same circle. They all more or less had some family privileges, but it was hard for them to not feel a bit sour when they saw this scene. There was also a person who had a good relationship with Quebec. He teased him from afar. Vice President O, have you taken a fancy to this person, or have you taken a fancy to this person's sister or aunt? You should greet everyone in advance. OK turned around. He wasn't angry at all. His doll-like face was full of smiles as he shook his head. Ambition doesn't depend on age. Boldness. Boldness. Do you guys understand? You guys haven't seen Rue 1's video? The one that came out of the elevator. That expression in her eyes wasn't an act. It wasn't an act. It was completely natural. Her charm was limitless. In comparison, OK spoke to this point and saw that there were girls here. He chuckled and bypassed the comparison. He rubbed his hands. Besides, my emotions are very pure. I've decided to start as a fan. I'll first establish a support group and a club. I'll watch Rue 1 grow up step by step. The few men who were familiar with OK were obviously still laughing and joking when they saw him like this. The junior sister, who was holding Chow Shanhai's arm, had just figured out the situation. She asked quietly, "That's the demon eye girl." "Yeah. You don't know?" The junior sister curled her lips. "She's not a big star." "Does everyone have to remember her?" Chow Shanhai smelled jealousy. He grinned and elbowed her lightly. Yes. She's definitely not as big as you." The junior sister patted his shoulder reproachfully. She then recalled Rue 1's slender and straight figure and laughed out loud. She moved closer to Chow Shanhai's ear and said, "Fortunately, she's wearing a dress. But it shouldn't be bad to change it. Are you sure you didn't get the wrong gender? This kind of thing is very popular now." Chow Shanhai rolled his eyes and slapped the junior sister to make her shut up. He didn't want to offend OK because of a woman's jealousy. Most importantly, he absolutely couldn't offend Rue 1 and the person behind her. The problem was that his attitude wasn't firm enough. The junior sister's train of thought was a little off. "That's right. Look at this. Luna just changed the desktop. Isn't it super cool? But I heard it's a woman." Chow Shanhai didn't have the leisure to look at the shared resources between the girls. But when the projection area was turned on, he still had to politely glance at it. Then he couldn't pull it out. At this time, the junior sister also made a sound of surprise. She discovered new information from the desktop picture. This person, she raised her head to look at the elevator door. Apart from the metal door, she obviously couldn't see anything else. But Chow Shanhai could clearly see it from the projection area. The figure that took up 2/3 of the picture seemed to be a boxer by profession. He was bare-chested, revealing the lean, hard, and smooth lines of muscles. He raised his forearms and clenched his fists, assuming a defensive stance in combat technique. This stance covered most of the person's face, but the half that was exposed was really delicate and pretty. Moreover, he wasn't old and still had a childish air to him. Of course, what left the deepest impression was that cold and gloomy eyes that seemed to be able to absorb and gather light. They gave this flat picture a vivid and vigorous feeling of power. It was as if in the next moment, he would quickly and violently throw a punch and directly attack a powerful enemy. Just as OK had said, "Courage," the corner of Chow Shanhai's mouth twitched. His eyes also half squinted. He subconsciously bypassed the lines of the upper body and focused on the head area. He began to evaluate. If the person in the picture had hair a little longer, cheeks a little more plumpness, and wore Acumen School's uniform, then, holy shit! It was also at this time that OK's line of sight shifted and circled around the palm-sized projection area. In the next second, his entire body was sucked in and he cried out involuntarily, "Rue 1?" Chao Shanhai shuddered involuntarily. Chapter 1131. In the conference room of the Shangding building, the atmosphere was strange and depressing, although it had nothing to do with silence. The entire room was covered in light and shadows radiating from the game interface, and there were almost realistic sound effects lingering in the ears of every participant. Some people were playing in the conference room, some were watching, some were paying attention to online public opinion, some were doing data analysis, and some were joining in through the long-distance communication network. Each of them had their own duties, and there were occasional exchanges, but they were basically stuck at the technical level. No one made a conclusive conclusion. This was because the one who determined the nature of the incident had been silent for too long. Luonan crossed his arms over his chest as he stood at the side of the long conference table. He leaned against the windowsill, his gaze a bit erratic. Sometimes, his eyes wandered around the game interface, and other times, he glanced at the familiar faces in the conference room. But most of the time, his gaze passed through the glass window and looked outside. It was common knowledge that the Xia City branch of the Ability User Society was located in the Shangding building. The floor was low and the lighting was terrible. There was no view to speak of. But Luonan seemed to want to escape from the shadowy area that was already completely covered by the enormous building. Look at this flower. As the convener and host of the meeting, he had been silent for too long, causing the function of the meeting itself to be eliminated. Fortunately, the people in the conference room were either acquaintances or professionals hired by the Foundation under his name. With the help of Bamboo Pole, a temporary secretary who was skilled and understanding, he was able to start the more practical technical analysis work. No matter what, it was better to collect as much information as possible, although no one knew if the information would be useful in the end. Bamboo Pole circled around the conference room. In the end, he circled back to Luonan. "What are you looking at?" Luonan shook his head. "I didn't see anything. I was just thinking about something." "All right then, what are you thinking about?" "Wishful thinking. This is not something a leader should say." Bamboo Pole grinned and lowered his voice. "Speaking of which, this meeting was a little rushed. We didn't prepare enough and didn't control the number of people. We shouldn't have met the new employee at this time. I was so angry that I became muddled. Wasn't I the one who suggested it? After all, this matter was directly related to the Foundation and had little to do with the branch for the time being. Besides, I think it's quite valuable for reference." Luonan's gaze streaked across the faces of everyone in the conference room once more. His voice became a bit lower. "At the very least, I can see what sort of attitude normal people have towards this matter. This includes their views towards us. How much they disapprove of us. Hey boss, if you say that, I'm afraid you won't be able to hold on for long." "Thanks for the reminder." The boss and the temporary secretary looked at each other and smiled bitterly. The current situation was that the producers had injected distortion, evolution, homo evolutus, and other sensitive elements into the new data for 10 days in the wilderness. They had also created an extremely complete system for them. Currently, the world's strongest group of people were engaged in a complex game around the relevant elements, and many large cities around the world were experiencing uncontrollable aberrant infections. It had to be said that 10 days in the wilderness, a large-scale production that could be called a game for all citizens, revealed such content. It had to be said that it was really two-directional. However, most people did not care about such things. This was because most of the changes in this world had long existed in people's endless fantasies. Especially since the era of distortion, these elements mentioned above were common in all kinds of creations and could not be considered extraordinary. This was especially true for gamers. They only cared about the quality of the game and the internal logic of the updated content. It would have been fine if the game was really terrible, but the quality of this new content was quite outstanding. The graphics and playability were both extremely strong, and there were no obvious logic bugs in the content. It was extremely attractive. Therefore, gamers had every reason to throw themselves into the game. They could swim freely within the large amount of content provided by the game. They could call friends, play online, or pursue achievements and trophies one after another. This was a very natural process. It was in line with normal human psychology. However, Luonan and the others wanted to go against the flow. They wanted to dig deep into the background of the game's data and malice. According to Bamboo Pole's words, "It's super boring. The experience is extremely bad. I feel like I'm a moralist and a political animal that's been mutated. This is the kind of trash I used to spew." However, Luonan and the people around him stood at the forefront of the surging tides of this era. They possessed a clear and distinct standpoint. They had to accept it, and they had already realized the mutation. At the very least, they had to understand how to translate it. They had to do their utmost to allow more people who were not too sensitive to understand the meaning within. It was mentally taxing. It was tedious and uninteresting. It was completely predictable. This was a thankless task. Luonan changed the topic. "How's the response right now?" Bamboo Pole smirked. "Just from a business point of view, the 3 years of Sharpening a Sword expansion is obviously a great success. The daily activity data on the official website isn't much of an exaggeration. As for Xia City, all the flagship stores are full. This is a working day. The evening rush hour hasn't arrived yet. Reservations are already booked all the way until the weekend." "What about public opinion?" "Right now, most people are discussing the matter as it stands. There are also people who nitpick, but people like us are loathsome. We are moralists who throw hats at the drop of a hat. We don't have much of a climate right now. Do you want to stir up a topic?" "Can we? It should be fine in Xia City. After all, it involves the problem of mutation. Everyone is quite sensitive about it recently. The surrounding areas are fine. But when we get to Spring City, it's basically... You understand." Luonan let out a breath. "Go west, go north, and even across the ocean. There's basically no hope. Public opinion is very complicated. The hearts of people are even more so. Perhaps we'll be so tired that we vomit blood that will have the opposite effect. But if we don't do anything and wake up, we'll discover that the entire world is our ally. Well, everything is possible in dreams." Luonan shook his head. "It should be said that there are people who are even more skilled at doing things in everyone's dreams." Bamboo Pole was a bit startled. Then he shook his head. "I'm more concerned about the standpoint of certain people than the influence of public opinion. The release of the expansion pack this time, for us who are in the Aberration Disposal faction, will highlight that we have bad intentions. It's not strange for the investors to do this. They're also experts at doing this. But the military is still considered a partner. They're letting them toss and turn like this. I'm worried that the various factions within the military have reached some sort of consensus. Yes, it's a temporary compromise. The power of inertia is quite strong." Luonan didn't respond to this topic. He looked to be a bit lost in thought. Instead, Yin Lo, who was participating in the conference through long-distance communication, took the initiative to join the discussion. "Mr. Bamboo Pole, according to our intelligence, the military doesn't have a clear attitude. Perhaps it can be said that the investors are taking advantage of the unclear opinion environment within the military to complete this probing jab. After all, it's only the public beta testing phase right now. There's too much leeway to maneuver." "No, it's not a probe." Luonan's gaze turned to look outside the window. His gaze was still erratic, but his tone had never been this certain since the start of the conference. "This is an official method. There's nothing more official than this. Inlo didn't dare to say anything more. Bamboo Pole spoke in a probing manner. It seems that this kind of interference and pressure isn't much for the work of the global census. It's not interference, nor is it pressure. It's a scramble. Huh. Luonan pointed at his own head. Scramble to land on the beach ahead of time. Occupy the high ground. This is to pave the way for the mutant new humans. Bamboo Pole locked gazes with Inlo, who was thousands of miles away. Bamboo Pole asked, "Are you talking about the environment of public opinion?" "No, it's the solution." Luonan extended his hand and tapped on the nearby AR image. Right now, the employee in charge of conducting the game test had just completed a mission and obtained skill points. He was preparing to climb the evolution tree, but he was a bit hesitant. Luonan reminded him, "Do brainless gene cultivation in the internal cultivation stage. Don't be in a rush to take shape. First accumulate enough points in the petri dish." The employee went over and over again, but he still did as his new boss said. Luonan turned around to face Bamboo Pole and Inlo. He grinned. "I think this will work. It's not just in the game." His wristband vibrated before he could finish speaking. He looked at the caller ID and ignored the confused Bamboo Pole and Inlo for the time being. He picked up the phone. "Brother Ping, what's up?" Xie Juanping's voice came from the other side. "Nanster, did you get into a conflict with that baby okay again in the past 2 days?" "Who?" Luonan didn't react in time. "It's that vice president of the Divine Research Society. The baby-faced guy who nearly burned down Withered Tree Sandbar last year." Luonan went twice. He finally recalled a bit of his memories and denied, "No, I haven't seen him in this period of time." "Then that's strange. This kid called me in such a hurry to get your contact information. I asked him what he wanted, but he didn't say. Speaking of which, you've really been protected by mysteries lately. Your contact number is completely confidential. People who want to find you can't find you, but people who want to give you trouble can be found." Xie Junping was ridiculing the so-called high-privilege group treatment that Xia City gave Luonan. The recent incident related to Rue Wen caused the issue of Luonan and his family's information security to once again be placed on the table. Luonan was quite open-minded. As long as someone deliberately wants to do something bad, those treatments are equivalent to nothing. Of course, our cooperation is quite low. We don't have bodyguards or anything like that. After all, Luonan wasn't a protected person. He didn't need the protection of the government. His opponents and enemies far exceeded the level that society's privileges could restrain. He wasn't the government's son, nor did he make any indelible contributions to the government. It was unrealistic to expect the government to take out large amounts of public power and resources to protect them airtight. In most cases, this kind of treatment only existed as a layer of warning for the family. In case his aunt and uncle, Emoya and Emo Peng encountered danger, Luonan would have time to react. Xie Junping grunted twice. "You're quite open-minded. I still have a meeting. If there's nothing else, I'll give your contact information to that kid." "Sure." Less than half a minute after the call ended, he received a call from an unknown number. Luonan's wristband displayed the words "no risk" at this time. Luonan laughed and picked up the call. Just as he said hello, the person on the other end yelled, "Are your marketing team full of pigs? This hype is 2F** King Shameless." Chapter 1132. Luonan obviously didn't care about the baffling accusation from a stranger. But as the conversation went deeper, his expression gradually turned serious. A dozen seconds later, he gave Bamboo Pole a meaningful glance and was the first to exit the room. He entered a small reception room next door. There wasn't a soul to be found here. Soon Bamboo Pole came in as well. Luonan transferred Ian Lee's long-distance communication to this place and turned on the multi-party video mode. Soon, OK's angry baby face appeared in the projection area. He saw the personnel configuration on Luo Nan's side and became even more furious. This is your team, right? I'll say it again. You have no bottom line. How can you use a girl's reputation to distort your image and Photoshop that kind of photo? You guys don't need to do this if you want to win over female and heterosexual fans. I know you guys definitely have some follow-up bullshit. Take it down as soon as possible. Don't think that I'm joking. My mom is the executive vice president of the Ladies Association of Xia City. I can deprive you of your guardianship rights at any time and sue you until you go bankrupt at the same time. Luo Nan and the other two exchanged glances and Luo Nan spoke. Thank you for your concern for Ruiwen. But before you express your attitude and emotions, can you send us the photo you saw? Right now we're completely confused. Confused your sister. OK's words were too fast and he accidentally brought Ruiwen in. His momentum was stifled and he hummed as he sent over the photo he spoke of. The gazes of the three converged and they came to a conclusion with just a glance. It really was a photo of Ruiwen. Handsome. A neutral persona really does attract female fans. She'll be very popular in niche circles. Bamboo Pole whistled and was met with Luo Nan and OK's stern glares. Inlu said, Mingtang culture definitely doesn't have this kind of hype plan. Miss Moya even made a request to Mingtang culture this morning. In fact, all information related to Miss Ruiwen has been completely frozen over at Mingtang culture since last weekend. They're also working on a cooling plan. They'll have corresponding actions soon. Of course, Inlu wasn't giving OK an explanation. She needed to express the facts and attitude to Luo Nan. Bamboo Pole rubbed his chin and added, This photo isn't photoshopped, right? What I'm saying is that it's probably been beautified. It's probably been restored from a low-resolution state, but it's definitely not a head transplant. Luo Nan nodded his head in confirmation. It's not photoshopped. It should be at the underground fighting arena. Yes, there. Luo Nan and Bamboo Pole both understood at this point. Inlu was a bit late by half a second, but she also came to a realization. What underground fighting arena? OK asked, but no one paid attention to him. Bamboo Pole scratched his head. If it's that place, things will get more complicated. Blackjack's venue had a lot of people to begin with, and it didn't seem to be particularly strict about prohibiting photography. Ruiwen had been there for a few years and could be considered a celebrity, so it was normal for her to leave behind a photo. Also, last year's 2 out of 1,000 incident caused a large amount of information related to Ruiwen to leak out. Pictures or video information like this shouldn't be rare in our circle. Video data? Luo Nan and OK spoke at the same time. Luo Nan's tone was fine, but OK was about to explode. After Luo Nan spoke, he immediately remembered. Yes, there's a video. Back then, he had used some video information that had leaked out from the fighting arena to convince his aunt's family. It was the time when Ruiwen's older brother was killed. Of course, Luo Nan later learned that Ruiwen's older brother and Ruiwen shouldn't be related by blood. It was just that Ruiwen's short memory was that they were grouped together after the fighting arena opened, and the older brother took care of her. The blackjack incident happened in early October of last year. It hadn't even been a year since then. But Luo Nan had experienced far too many things in these 9 months. His memories of the underground fighting arena were actually a bit fuzzy. It was hard to dig out any useful information by searching through the details of his memories. Bamboo Pole was a bit disapproving. Is this sort of picture useful? With Ruiwen's temperament, would she care about this? Probably not, Luo Nan spoke halfway through his words, but then he remembered what he saw 2 nights ago in Ruiwen's projection area. He was a bit hesitant for a time, not daring to rashly come to a conclusion. Bamboo Pole changed his perspective to assist in the analysis. Forgive me for speaking a bit bluntly, but there are some differences between the picture and Ruiwen's recent image. She was completely a boy at that time. If it weren't for the fact that everyone was familiar with each other and the topic of conversation was this, it would have been quite difficult for me to recognize her at first glance. I've been monitoring the network information of the boss and your family all this time. Rue-1 is indeed the most popular among you, but there don't seem to be any rumors about her. This is okay. Oh, student au Quebec. Let me ask you something. When you saw this picture, did the owner associate it with Rue-1? It seems like. OK wanted to say something but stopped. His expression turned rather ugly, and he actually couldn't continue. Bamboo Pole saw the change in his expression and clapped his hands. Don't tell me it was you who blurted it out. You're a hardcore fan. OK was speechless. Bamboo Pole rolled his eyes. What was the situation like at the time? How many people were there? Were their mouths tight? Did you warn them afterwards? What were the chances that they would listen to you? Did you send people to track down the source of this picture? Did you pay attention to secrecy when you gave chase? A minute later, OK exited the group chat with an ashen face. Bamboo Pole clapped his hands. The little baby has been dealt with, but the problem is still there. The nature is hard to determine. Speaking of which, I still don't understand. Was this an accident or was it premeditated? Or was it just a prank? Luonan frowned. On this point, I agree with OK's words. It doesn't matter if it was premeditated or a prank. It's hard to trust this kind of trick. Do you think that someone is messing with you through Rue-1? That's my first reaction. Luonan thought back to the premonition he made not too long ago. I've been in all sorts of trouble lately, big and small. I feel like someone is using a tactic to tire me out. Bamboo Pole didn't ask what was a big trouble and what was a small trouble. He just said, if it's just to divert your attention and waste your energy, then this kind of trick won't cause you any substantial harm. Even if there is a follow-up, it won't cause you any substantial harm. This doesn't seem like the work of a schemer from the secret room. It's not that they can't think of it, it's that there's no need. What do you think, Brother Bamboo Pole? Rather than saying it's a tactic to tire me out, it's more like a counterattack from all sides unconsciously and unconsciously after the original balance is lost. Bamboo Pole had clearly already considered this matter. Boss, right now you're like a massive star that suddenly inserted itself into the solar system. Because of your arrival, the original orbit of the celestial bodies has been completely messed up. All of the celestial bodies have begun to draw closer to you, and they are also resisting at the same time. There's only one reason. Boss, your weight is far too heavy. Thank you for the compliment. I'm just saying. Right now, I don't have any objective data to support me. Boss, you can take a look. Bamboo Pole was all smiles. He did his best to make the atmosphere more relaxed. With the current situation, it's impossible for us to fly to a high place with a whoosh. We can look down on all things from a high vantage point, and we can grasp the most crucial clue in an instant. For a considerable amount of time, we still have to deal with every move that comes our way. We need to be able to defend this side of Xia City, and we need to be more open when we go outside Xia City to steal from someone. When all is said and done, those people are made of flesh and blood. They aren't celestial bodies that don't have sentience. If your fist really smashes into their faces, they will certainly be afraid. Once they're afraid, things will be easier. This is what it means to strike with one fist to avoid 100 punches. Luonan nodded, but then he shook his head a second later. This is true for the vast majority of people. But for that one, I'm talking about Li Wei. That fellow should be completely different. The feeling of being the big boss behind the scenes? Boss, you seem to care quite a bit about this person. Luonan didn't hide it at all. It's because he's the sun that those celestial bodies revolve around. What's important is that he's orderly and self-contained. From the looks of it, all the steps are extremely orderly. Moreover, they are quite feasible. Bamboo Pole immediately thought of the job next door. Boss, what you're saying is that the 10 days in the Wilderness expansion pack has great potential for this new skill tree? Luonan said flatly. There won't be any problems climbing all the way to the top of the skill tree. Bamboo Pole subconsciously swept a glance at Enlu. He saw that the latter's expression was extremely serious, as if it was a reflection of his current mood. He only heard Luonan say, I suspect that the new humans described in the game are very likely to have already appeared in some laboratories. Just like the deep blue walkers in the game. Yes, there have been some minor adjustments to this system, right? Bamboo Pole nodded. It's not just minor adjustments. There's also the addition of the Exceed the Limit mission. There might even be a follow-up extension to the skill tree. It's just that no one has been able to clear it yet. But the setup of the game's core has already been completed. If we consider the usage of the high-end simulator of Frost River reality, then the cores of the burners and the Deep Blue platform should have completed the corresponding upgrade. Luonan suddenly laughed, but his laughter was cold and sinister. The burners are fine, but I don't know if there's anyone who's willing to give the mutant new humans a try. Enlu was one of the people most familiar with this project, so she was duty-bound to take responsibility. She immediately declared, I will monitor this information in real time. Bamboo Pole wanted to ask why Luonan was so certain and why he had so much confidence in Li Wei. However, he hesitated for a moment and didn't ask. He only heard Luonan say, every iteration of the core technology is equivalent to taking a step forward for civilization. Even the smartest people in the world, the most well-trained research groups, find it hard to accurately predict what the next iteration of technology will look like. However, thanks to Li Wei, many people have seen 3 to 5 more steps through his arrangements. The first to third steps might be correct. At the very least, they are options that can be walked through. But what will happen after that? Luonan continued speaking without waiting for Bamboo Pole or Enlu to respond. Even if they walk through the first 3 steps, everyone will still be able to take the 4th and 5th steps after untold hardship. But who knows if this kind of small path has an end? Is the end connected to the great road to heaven, or is it connected to a bottomless abyss? I don't hold any hope for this. Chapter 1133. Luonan's tone was certain, without the slightest bit of hesitation. This was because he had already seen the most difficult aspect of this path, from a mystical dream. The struggle of the heavenly Yuan Empire's survivors in the Hongguang system was the future path that Li Wei had planned out. Even though Luonan had only seen an insignificant silhouette of that great era, he had not seen the true end point. It was just a few dozen steps ahead of the current Earth's roadmark. From the information he could gather, he really couldn't find a single bit of evidence to maintain optimism. Again, if Li Wei really was a visitor from outer space with a similar background, then he would be more familiar with the fate of the heavenly Yuan Empire in the Hongguang system than Luonan. Li Wei certainly understood that with the foundational strength of Earth civilization, just 5 more steps would cause them to self-destruct on the path of high-speed mutation iteration. His Homo evolutus path, which was built on the foundation of mutation, truly harbored malicious intentions. Luonan didn't elaborate further. He still hadn't found a better way to share this information with others. Even if he wanted to replay that dream, the heavily overloaded simulator system still hadn't recovered. He took the initiative to return to the topic. I'm going to take a look at Rui-1. She has class this morning. Enlu timely answered. When Miss Mo-Ye notified the company, she seemed to say that Miss Rui-1 would be skipping class today to hide from the reporters and gossipers. That's perfect. I'll go to the laboratory to find her. Rui-1 was certainly in the misty maze right now. Luonan was a bit weak when he spoke. It wasn't just because he had told a small lie to his friend. It was also because it would be hard for him to find Rui-1 in this state. In such a complex, chaotic environment of space and time, The connection between the structure of the format pyramid wasn't enough for Luo Nan to lock onto Rui Wen's precise location. Even the transmission of information was quite difficult. But no matter what was said, as an older brother, he needed to mentally prepare Rui Wen before this matter spread. It didn't matter if it was useful or not. Of course, it would be best if he could nip the problem in the bud. Luo Nan made the arrangement. Brother Bamboo Pole, you help monitor the situation. Of course, it's best if you can strangle the source. Contact the SCA if necessary. Also, follow up with public relations. In Lo, have Mingtang culture come up with a plan quickly. Also, don't cause any more trouble. Let me announce to the public that I've been using a book reading app recently, Me Read app, to read books in cache and read them offline. In Lo lowered her head. I'll keep an eye on him. Luo Nan nodded, and his figure slowly faded away amidst this slight movement. His afterimage remained, but his main body had already passed through the distortion of spacetime to jump to his destination. An alarm went off in the house. Bamboo Pole pressed his ear and contacted the other side through the hexaear. It's nothing. It's just Boss Luo's daily routine. After all, this was the location of the Xia City branch. It was a vital region in the structure of the psychic wave network. It was extremely sensitive to all phenomena that interfered with each other on the mental and material plane. With Bamboo Pole's endorsement, the alarm stopped ringing. Bamboo Pole pinched his chin and said in distress, Boss Luo going for psychological counseling doesn't seem appropriate. Of course, when it comes to Rui Wen, it's pretty much the same for everyone. But, do you think the boss needs it now? Inlo gave Bamboo Pole a cold glance and directly cut off the communication. Luo Nan's mental state could be considered stable for now. He didn't immediately rush into the misty labyrinth and call Rui Wen back. That would only create a tense atmosphere. It was very likely that Rui Wen, who was quite ignorant of such matters, would become sensitive. He didn't even enter the misty labyrinth. He just pondered it very seriously in the underground laboratory. In the end, he left a message for Rui Wen through the manager of this place, the military-grade AI, the standard bearer. Then he walked outside, heading to the upper-level area that belonged to the Mystic Arts Research Society. A few minutes later, Luo Nan sat in a leisure booth next to the passageway at the bottom of the lake. He asked for a cup of coffee and turned on the internet at the same time. He was like a normal, idle student who dared to skip class. He seemed to be leisurely browsing the contents of the internet. After all, it was still class time. There weren't many members in the society. Even if they saw Luo Nan, they would at most give him a few glances. It was mostly due to the special treatment of Luo Nan's appropriation of the society's assets. This kind of reaction made Luo Nan breathe a sigh of relief. It looked like Rui Wen's new wave of scandals had yet to ferment, at least within the circle of the Mystic Research Society. As for the internet, it could be considered calm right now. With the variability of hot topics on the internet, it was very hard for a single matter to become the focus of attention of the netizens for a long time, unless it was a highly stimulating topic or an operation that continuously bought trending searches. But some matters, even if they were removed from the mainstream of public opinion, would still precipitate within a few special circles. They would attract people with different standpoints, endlessly tearing and bombarding each other, and constantly producing chemical reactions. Perhaps they would completely finish their reactions and become a stable pile of waste. But they could also breed strength that could erupt at any time. If cold treatment was needed, the most taboo thing to do at this stage was to throw in new material. These small circles possessed extraordinary enthusiasm and acuity towards similar matters. Their imagination ability was top-notch. No one knew what kind of chain reaction would erupt with the addition of new material. Luo Nan also paid attention to a few small circles of this nature. For example, East Asia's largest gathering place for gossip, the Sky Street community. Last year's University Day, Luonan and Peony Tang had used this network community to capture a chain of aberrations and infections revolving around celebrities. The ecology here was complex. The light side and the dark side existed at the same time. Gossip peddlers came and went. Many entertainment companies also bought water armies. Some even personally went into the field, both in the open and in the dark. It was quite lively. Some of Rue Wen's authoritative material had mostly exploded here. She rolled a few times before going out of the circle. It was no wonder that Zhang Yingying, OK, and the others would suspect that the Demon Eye Woman incident was a publicity stunt. It really was a routine operation. It looked very familiar, and it seemed that the latest scandalous material related to Rue Wen had yet to reach this circle. Luonan skimmed and searched around, but he didn't find any statements that were worth being vigilant about. However, in the information stream of the Banqing Entertainment Circle, he saw industrialist Beishan Xuehui's pragmatic turnaround in the information flow of Luonan's entertainment circle. Luonan read and read. He relaxed a bit, but he was also a bit distracted. Rue Wen's matter could be treated as a joke if it wasn't for the special context of the current situation. But it was precisely because of this time period, this environment, and the faintly discernible figure behind the scenes of this series of events that Luonan had no choice but to seriously consider it. If he were to use the analogy of a bamboo pole to describe it, then it could be considered a kind of gravitational effect. Li Wei's imprint on this world was far too deep. His foundation was truly solid. Li Wei's position in the current era of Earth civilization was far too deep. He was a dark star that caused people to worry even more. The current Luonan could indeed use his own weight to make the entire world raise its eyebrows. But the reality of being a latecomer meant that he was destined to struggle against the operating order that Li Wei had established in advance. Bamboo pole's analogy was correct. He was a massive celestial body that had invaded the solar system. From the perspective of many people, Li Wei's method was perfectly justified. The value generated from this system was the hard currency that possessed credibility. Thus, a substantial closed loop was formed. Any change, especially a change from the foundation, would inevitably pay a sunk cost that was hard to bear. In the face of a closed-loop system, no matter how tempting Luonan's offer was, it was only a possibility. Most of the time, he was a destroyer of existing benefit. This kind of destruction, and even the tendency of destruction, did not simply affect theoretical systems, evolutionary research, cutting-edge manufacturing, and other high and mighty domains. Instead, it manifested in all aspects. For example, the 10 days in the Wilderness expansion pack this time. Just in Xia City alone, millions of players stayed up all night. They threw themselves into the game and played to their heart's content. If Luonan were to beat the drums and gongs at this time and pick on the game, especially if he were to use the illusory and inexplicable future of humanity as a yardstick, wouldn't he be a destroyer? Such a character was destined to be unpopular. Once he was exposed, he would receive an earth-shattering amount of ridicule and abuse. Of course, he could also be completely forgotten or ignored. Such a situation would undoubtedly make one not know whether to laugh or cry. It would make one's heart go cold. The game was like this, and the real world might not be an exception. There was no one to blame for such a situation. Was he supposed to blame the general public, who was ignorant of the existence of interstellar civilization? Was he supposed to blame them? Was he supposed to blame them? Was he supposed to blame these people who were ignorant of the existence of interstellar civilization? Luonan was bound to reverse this situation. But how was he supposed to reverse it? Was the global census strong enough? Luonan seriously considered it over and over again, but he was unable to come to a conclusion. If he had to come to a conclusion, then it would be: he needed to increase his strength. Luonan needed to increase his bargaining chips, increase his force, and obtain a more prominent effect. Therefore, he had always been low-key and covert with the global census. He didn't want to reveal his trump card in advance, passively using tactics to add fuel to the fire and sink into the mud of entanglement. But in the end, he still had to reveal his card. What should he do then? Luonan spun his spoon and unconsciously stirred his coffee. It collided with the walls of the cup, creating tinkling sounds. It was like the fragmented thoughts that flashed through his mind. Perhaps it was because he was thinking too much, or perhaps it was because of the stimulation from today's two matters, but the outline of Luonan's thoughts became clearer amidst this tinkling noise. He was exerting his strength in basic research and in the upper echelons. But if he wanted to rapidly expand his influence and force, shouldn't he use some unconventional methods? His wristband vibrated at this time. It was a notification from the Sky Street community. The title of the pushed message didn't look particularly attractive. Everyone help take a look. What's the relationship between this guy and #magic-eyed woman? I'm a fan of this guy. There was a lag in the push of the message. By the time Luonan clicked in, the message had already been sent 2 minutes ago. The most important thing was that the title had actually changed. Shock. Magic-eyed woman or magic-eyed man? Yep, it was even trashier. Chapter 1134. Luonan's fingers twirled around the ear of the cup as he sneered. What the hell was this angle? But it was very clear that it was in line with the logic of a portion of people. There were already people who replied below. Sure enough, such a pretty girl must be a boy. It looked like it was directed, but it was actually just playing around with an old trope. The follow-ups had similar lines of thought. It looked lively, but it didn't stir up any waves. The following few responses were mostly, the poster's eyesight is excellent, but he lacks confidence. Go be a fan, we'll allow it, and so on. Of course, there were some fans of Rue who chased after the topic to come in and report it. 7 or 8 responses within 2 minutes proved that the demon-eyed woman incident was still quite popular, but that was it. This continued until a highly highlighted post that was liked by many people appeared. Taking without permission, taking screenshots and posting indiscriminately, I don't care. It doesn't matter if it's a boy or a girl, I don't care. After all, beauty is number one. The information is below. It's not first-hand, but it's verified to the greatest degree. Those who are interested can figure it out for themselves. In the end, I'm a fan. A video was inserted below the post that was filled with a sense of superiority. The preview image was the moment when the main post displayed Rue when assuming a fighting stance. Luonan sucked in a shallow breath. He was already mentally prepared. He even looked at the ID of the storymaster. It was called something like Lord Bird. It seemed that his community level and privileges were quite high. He opened the video and at nearly the same time, Bamboo Pole made a call. Boss, something's come out of Sky Street. Yeah, I'm watching. The video began to play as they spoke. There were no surprises. The noisy, chaotic, and feverish environment presented in the video was undoubtedly the underground fighting arena from back then. Hundreds and thousands of rich spectators and gamblers, under the dual stimulation of blood and money, vigorously applauded and shouted. They cheered for the targets they placed their bets on. Or they let out ear-piercing hisses and curses that were unbearable to the ears to disturb their opponent. The person holding the camera wasn't much better. Even though the anti-shake performance was superior, the large swaying angle of view in the early stages was enough to prove his mood at the time. The seemingly meaningless shots revealed twisted and crazed faces. There was no sign of the smart, capable, or sanctimonious appearance that they usually had. Nearly 10 seconds passed before the camera focused on the target. The broadcast screen in the center of the fighting arena. It just so happened to give a close-up. Raven. Without a doubt, it was Rue one. Even though she was thinner and weaker than when he first saw her, Luonan was able to immediately recognize her. At that time, Rue Wen's height was only about 1.3 or 4 meters. She only wore tight shorts, and her arm was wrapped in bandages that had already changed color. There weren't many lines of muscle on his body, and it was impossible to tell if he was a man or a woman. There was only sweat and the crisscrossing scars on his body. And across from her, her opponent's age wasn't that great either, but he was clearly nearing adulthood. Moreover, he was a muscular man covered in dazzling essential oils. He looked as capable as a black panther, and compared to Ruewen, his build was nearly a third larger. This kind of battle had no concept of weight in a regular fight. From a visual point of view, it was a completely unequal battle. This was the youth combat launched by Blackjack's underground fighting arena. Compared to the fight between adults, the technique and strength might not be as good, but it was more intense and cruel. Clearly, at that time, not only had Ruewen not awakened her extraordinary powers, she was in her body. Compared to when Luonan had first met her, she was far inferior in terms of physical strength and combat skills. Therefore, she was at a disadvantage in the fight. She could only rely on her calm state of mind and the precise control of her body, which had already begun to show signs of life, to avoid the opponent's heavy punches and grabs. She used small injuries to trade for space and struggled to maintain her position. Luonan clearly knew that Ruewen was unharmed right now, and that she had certainly left the arena alive. But Luonan's heart still clenched when he saw this scene. Due to Ruewen's current strength, he often overlooked the short few years of Ruewen's struggle to survive in the underground fighting arena. Now that he thought about it, the little girl's quiet and repressed personality traits were formed from a blank slate in that environment. He should rejoice that the current Ruewen wasn't a bloody and cruel homicidal maniac or a madman who would self-destruct at the slightest provocation. That should be the normal state. Luonan knew that after the underground fighting arena was dealt with, those young boxers who had been reared by Blackjack had basically all encountered serious obstacles in the process of adapting to normal society after they were rescued. There were both factors of drug withdrawal and also personality and personality problems within. In comparison, Ruewen was the most special one. Oh, looking at it from this angle, perhaps it was Ruewen's innate talent and perception that were different from ordinary people that had played a positive role. Bamboo Pole's voice cut in during Luonan's contemplation. I suggest that we wait and see for now. The current video is just a small annoyance. In terms of visual effects, there should be leeway for Ruewen. Due to the environment, age, gender, appearance, physique, and other factors, there's a natural element of sympathy within. Yes. Also, the ID of the person who posted the video is that Master Tai. According to the information we've obtained from our initial contact, he was the one who first collected the video data related to Ruewen from the dark web. He transferred it to a niche professional fighting forum, and then it was forwarded and spread by others. He can be considered one of the clear-cut sources. Can we do something and make him take it back? This fellow has quite a bit of reputation in the Sky Street community. He's usually very active. It's said that his family has a mine. If we deal with him hastily, we might end up making a fool of ourselves. I feel that it's better to try and communicate privately. This person doesn't seem to be a low-key person. He should have some connections with Little Xie and the other second-generation circles. I've already talked to Little Xie. There should be news soon. Bamboo Pole's train of thought was very clear. If we can communicate, then we'll use our status as relatives to request. Yeah, let's give him some face. Let's call it a request. Let him take down the relevant content. At the very least, don't add any more dirt. If he doesn't know what's good for him, then it won't be too late for us to make a move. Luonan felt very worry-free. Brother Bamboo Pole, you're right. There's more. The effects have already been created. The video is highly bloody and intense. Highly bloody. Luonan only felt heartache for Ruewen as he watched all this. Was he desensitized to bloody scenes after mingling in the inner world for so long? Bamboo Pole was very baffled. Didn't you watch it already? I haven't finished watching it yet. Hurry up and watch it. What are you pondering over the details right now? Forget it. You're the boss. You can do whatever you want. I'm just suggesting that we do some appropriate guidance. We need to take a more orthodox and more official route. We need to highlight our identities as victims. We need to take a step forward and form a shield. Victim? Isn't Rue-1 the victim? Even if he was an ability user, he could still be a weak chicken that was persecuted before awakening. Some of the baby-faced man's words were quite reasonable. Rue-1's gender and age could be in places like the Lion Girl Guild and the Association for the Protection of Minors. Fong was making an issue out of it. After all, it was very important for the media and the public to have a good first impression, which would be very useful for the subsequent handling. At this time, your treatment as a member of the high authority group will come into play. Luo Nan expressed his approval, but these matters were still the work of Bamboo Pole, the temporary secretary. Bamboo Pole continued his analysis. As for the level of public opinion, it's a little more complicated. Even if we do our best in the orthodox channels, we can't underestimate the public's rebellious mentality. The hype from before still attracted some anti-fans for Rue-1. Also, the provocative nature of the video itself will create a lot of variables. I'll keep an eye on him. Luo Nan took the initiative to ask for work. Right now, the main issue is the disturbance in Xia City. The number of people who pay attention to gossip is limited. I can still tell who is truly ignorant and who is up to no good. Bamboo Pole couldn't help but laugh. What are you sure about? Are we going to follow the network cable? Isn't it more direct to go through the sea of consciousness? Please don't be lenient. I'll do my best. Hey. What I mean is, don't complicate a simple problem. It won't end well if someone dies. I know. Luo Nan's concise response caused Bamboo Pole, the temporary secretary with a headache, to go offline. While they were talking, the popularity of this thread had already completely exploded. It was just like in the video. Under Rue-1's delicate elbow, the eyeballs and blood exploded on the face of the panther-like opponent. Any normal person would basically collapse after receiving this kind of attack. But in the video, the panther-like opponent actually roared and exploded with an even more astonishing intensity of attack. He should have taken drugs. The cruel battle had yet to end. Luo Nan frowned as he watched the video continue to advance under the rapidly escalating bloody scene. Luo Nan flipped through the thread again, highlighting the comments below. The content clearly changed after a few minutes. Bro. The greeting entered Luo Nan's ears, and he subconsciously stirred. Only then did he discover that Rue-1 was already by his side. She should have heard the message from Flag-bearer and rushed over. Oh, so early. Luo Nan responded randomly. He was very glad that he didn't use any projection or any other external function. But after some thought, he could hide it from the present, but he couldn't hide it from the future. He came to do psychological counseling, not to cover Rue-1's eyes and ears. Especially with Rue-1's obsessive attention to his image on the internet. This matter was bound to be impossible to hide. Luo Nan hesitated for a moment, but he still persisted with his earlier plan. He revealed a smiling face. Oh Rue-1. I just so happen to have something to tell you. Speaking of which, someone has posted information about you on the internet again. Rue-1 stood by the table, expressionless. She just asked, is it still those training videos? The word still had quite a bit of spirituality. Luo Nan carefully pondered over it and responded slowly. No, it's when you were in the underground fighting arena. Oh. Rue-1's response was abnormally dull. It was impossible to tell whether she cared or didn't care from her simple response. Or perhaps this sort of dullness was her normal state. Luo Nan carefully observed her, but he was still unable to discern whether Rue-1's response came from her heart or whether it was a brilliant disguise. She could be considered to be sluggish or numb, and so on. Luo Nan hesitated for a moment, but he still took a step forward. Do you want to take a look? Okay. Chapter 1135. Her movements were simple as well. She just sat next to Luonan and watched as he opened up the projection interface. Inside was the topic thread. At this time, the number of views and replies to the post had completely exploded. Looking at the forum, there were already more than 10 related posts, and it was almost overwhelming. Bamboo Pole also sent him relevant links and analysis of the trending topics on social media outside of the Tianjie community. It had only been slightly more than an hour since the thread was posted on Tianjie community, but the topic had already entered the trending list of many social media platforms. Every minute there would be a large number of discussions and threads. It was extremely appropriate to say that it was in full swing. But the most absurd thing was that Luonan was prepared to start from the beginning for the sake of letting Rui Wen understand the ins and outs of the story. But when he wanted to open the video sent by Lord Ho, it was already ineffective. Luonan almost believed that Bamboo Pole would make the first move. But very quickly, Master Yang changed his statement and made a statement. I didn't pay attention to the occasion. The content of the video scared the children, and it doesn't conform to the forum's rules. At present, I need to do some post-editing before I post it. The people who moved the links before should have all been invalidated. As for those who changed their names and pretended to be the original authors, be careful that the SCA comes looking for you. That is all I have to say. Good luck. Rui Wen turned to look at Luonan. Luonan was a bit embarrassed. Speaking of which, the scene of eyeballs exploding and flesh splattering was indeed a little otherwise. It would have been impossible for it to rise in popularity so quickly. Rui Wen didn't seem to care. She only took the initiative to read the replies on the post with undisguised curiosity. She was reading very seriously. Even after a few hundred replies, a large number of repeated messages such as requesting resources and requesting unedited version flooded the page, drowning out the content of the discussion and debate. She continued reading one message after another. There were all sorts of opinions, all sorts of likes and dislikes, all sorts of conflicts, and even fanning the flames. The comments on the internet were not like normal communication. Being straightforward was considered light, and adding fuel to the flames and going to extremes was the norm. Off to the side, Luonan saw a large amount of curses like inhumane, perverted ladyboy, murderous embryo, and so on. I can't accept the cries of, I'm no longer a fan. This was only the first wave of reaction, and it would only be worse in the future. Luonan had wanted to stop Rui Wen, but he didn't say anything in the end. Because he saw the reflection of the projection interface in Rui Wen's eyes, as well as her usual concentration. Apart from that, there were no other fluctuations. Those streams of information brimming with turbid emotions didn't seem to arouse the slightest bit of response in Rui Wen's heart. The question was, what was the motivation behind that curiosity and attention? Luonan muttered to himself for a moment before calling Bamboo Pole. When the call connected, he was still nagging non-stop. This has really exploded. It's out of the circle. All the major platforms have removed hundreds of videos with the excuse that it's too bloody, but there are still edited screenshots flying all over the place. I highly recommend Me reading app. It's really not bad. It's worth installing. After all, you can read books in a cache and read them offline. Send me a link that I can see. Hey, haven't you seen it already? Rui Wen wants to see it. Isn't this too much? Is this a stimulant therapy, boss? Before Luonan could answer, another person called in. He looked at the caller ID and saw that it was actually his uncle, Mo Haihang. Luonan's mind jumped. He hurriedly said to Bamboo Pole, I'm hanging up for now. Don't forget to send me the link. He seamlessly connected to his uncle's call. Sure enough, the other side bluntly asked, Do you know what's going on with the bloody video related to Rui Wen online? His uncle had long since known of Rui Wen's experiences in the underground fighting arena. Back then, Luonan had asked He Wayne to provide a few carefully selected and edited videos for the sake of persuading his family to adopt Ruewan. Knowing the inside story made it easier to communicate. Luonan spoke the truth. We're already paying attention. For now, we haven't figured out if it's an accident or a conspiracy. What are you guys thinking? Are you preparing to delete or limit the stream? Does Ruewan know about this? She knows. She's watching it right now. She hasn't thought of any countermeasures yet. She's still observing. Of course, this observing had multiple meanings. The targets of observation were the trends of public opinion online. It also included Ruewan. Luonan subconsciously swept a glance at Ruewan's face next to him. Ruewan was very sensitive to his gaze. Moreover, she could hear her own name. Her gaze temporarily left the projection area. She tilted her head and locked gazes with him. She was still calm. Luonan smiled at Ruewan. No matter what Ruewan's reaction was, he had to maintain his confidence in front of her no matter what. This was the only way to fulfill his duty as an older brother. Therefore, Luonan's words carried a bit more certainty when he conversed with his uncle. It's fine right now. As long as we don't care, it's not a big deal what happens in the outside world. Of course, we can't just let people casually toss and turn. Measures will certainly be taken. It's just that aunt and uncle might have to work a bit harder in the near future. There will still be many disturbances in the outside world. Don't worry about this. What are we afraid of? We already have experience. We even withstood the storm of your grandfather back in the day. There's no need to mention this nature right now. You're so magnanimous. Luonan's wristband vibrated several times in the time it took to say a few words. Emoya, Emopeng, Zhang Yingying, Octopus, Shuelei, Xie Junping, Tianxi. All of them were calling him like a swarm of bees. There were even a few unfamiliar numbers in between. Though they were blocked in an instant due to insufficient authority, there was no doubt that they had truly stepped out of the loop. Luonan didn't plan on chatting with his friends for the time being. He hastily ended the call with his uncle, and turned his head to look at Ruewan. Right now, Ruewan had already taken the initiative to jump out of that thread. She was very proficient in searching for topics related to herself in the Sky Street community and a few other social media platforms. The wider the area she paid attention to, the more information she could absorb. Though there were no signs of her mental defenses collapsing so far, Luonan had no choice but to be on guard. He spent a few seconds preparing his words. But when faced with Ruewan's seemingly clear and transparent state of mind that seemed bottomless, in the end he still took out the most straightforward question. "Oh Ruewan, aren't you angry looking at these things?" Ruewan turned to look at him once more. Then she shook her head. "Then, do you have any thoughts?" "I do." Luonan just stared at her. Ruewan slightly lowered her eyelids. "I want to see what I really look like." Ruewan raised her eyes and locked gazes with Luonan. She spoke very seriously 2 seconds later. "Can this sort of thing continue on forever?" Chapter 1136. What does Ruewan mean by "keep it up"? She's interested in becoming a public figure? All young girls love that. Ruewan. That's Ruewan. You know Ruewan better than Ruewan? That's not necessarily true. In the underground laboratory of Gear, a video conference was held. Aside from Bamboo Pole and Yin Lu, who had been discussing matters in the morning, there was also Zhang Yingying, Octopus, Papercut, Xie Junping, and others. They were all friends who were relatively familiar with Ruewan. They had come specifically to act as advisors. Luonan originally wanted to pull Cat Eyes, who had the best relationship with Ruewan, but she was currently employed by the military. Communication was inconvenient, so Luonan could only drop the idea. Luonan originally wanted to have Ruewan attend the conference and explain his thoughts, but he couldn't bear to let the little girl do a self-dissection in front of others. He simply sent her into the misty maze. He wanted to use the conference to organize his thoughts and then discuss them in private. Though this was the plan, Luo Nan's thoughts still lingered on Rui Wen's peculiar thoughts after the video conference began. He was more or less distracted by her internal and external clairvoyance. As for the others, they found it hard to continue after a round of heated discussion. Bamboo Pole's conclusion was very representative. It's not easy to guess anyone's thoughts, let alone Rui Wen. She's not an ordinary person. Let's talk about something practical first. Let's turn this illusory psychological problem into a real problem that can be touched and solved. Bamboo Pole gave a demonstration as he spoke. Little Xie, how are you doing with the source of the online public opinion? This was the first time Xie Junping was in charge of the inner world's affairs. At the very least, he could handle it. So he pushed away his afternoon work and specifically dealt with this matter. He was a bit excited. I've already made contact with that Master Chow. Brother Bamboo Pole, your information is correct. It's old 5 of the Chow family. Though his father is only a colonel, he comes from a long line of military officers. Since the founding of Xia City, there have been 3 generations of over a dozen people serving in the close defense army. They can be considered to have deep roots and flourishing leaves. Truth be told, we're not in the same circle, but our relationship with Toto can still speak. We did our job well, and they gave us quite a bit of face. They removed us just like that. Nominally, we have to edit it, but whether or not we post it is up to us to decide. Bamboo Pole smiled. That should be enough. Yeah, it seems like he's really a fan of Rui Wen. He even asked for an autograph. This shouldn't be a problem, right? Everyone looked at Luo Nan. Luo Nan nodded. It shouldn't be a big problem. Xie Junping shook his head. Actually, there's still a problem. Chow Wu said that he obtained his resources through the dark web forum. It was said that in the early years, this forum was used to advertise and attract members for Blackjack's underground fighting arena. A considerable part of the live audience was attracted from here. They also had a tradition of disseminating related resources. It's not just Xia City. All over the world, similar bloody fighting videos are recorded and disseminated. The forum's name is Bloodbath. Of course, it's the same as the majority of the dark web. There's an entire industry chain here. Whether it's a pure competition, an organized sparring, or gambling, they form their own system. It's not just limited to Xia City. In other words, it's basically impossible to completely control the dissemination of related resources. Luo Nan nodded. This was in line with his previous estimations. Xie Junping didn't just state the problem. He also did some work. Right now, we can control as much as we can. I'm thinking that Chow Wu and a group of people from the Bloodbath Forum in Xia City will form their own faction. Tonight, Husseiner and I will invite them to sit down. Consider it our thanks for the face he gave us this morning. We'll also let these people tie up their pockets in Xia City. Chow Wu has a close relationship with the military. That's why I asked He Donglu to keep up appearances. However, this He kid is too jumpy. I really can't keep him in check when his hedonistic nature sets in. That's why I want you, Nanster, to give him a heads up and pressure him. Before Luo Nan could speak, Papercut, who had been playing close to He Donglu recently, laughed. It's fine. He Donglu, that kid, is much smarter than he looks on the surface. He knows what's going on. If you invite him, he'll certainly be happy to cooperate. Of course, if Nanster gives him a heads up, he'll certainly have more face. He'll be even more happy. Luo Nan grunted and snapped back to reality from his deep thoughts. He didn't delay and simply gave He Donglu a call. The other side quickly connected. He rushed to greet Luo Nan, Nanster. Is there something you need from me? It's about the place tonight. Luo Nan's mind spun slightly when he saw He Donglu's deliberately cheerful and familiar tone. He Donglu's words were a bit messy, but he didn't deliberately do it. The sensor network that covered Xia City slightly vibrated, and relevant scenes flowed before his eyes. And after these real-time scenes, there was a layer of even more fuzzy information flow. It was an indirect effect. For the time being, it was impossible to form something concrete, but it made Luo Nan's mind stir. On the plane of reality, Luo Nan didn't stumble at all. He smoothly continued, "Yes, I'll have to trouble you. Also, you're close to my house. If you have time, can you come pick me up?" He Donglu was a bit stupefied for a moment. "You're also? That's fine. It's on the way. I'll be there before 6. He Donglu's words were quite excited. "Thanks. Let's talk later." Luo Nan hung up the phone, and he received astonished gazes from all sides. "You're going to this place? You need to pay more attention to Rui Wen's matter." Xie Junping scratched his head. "If you go, He Donglu will certainly put in more effort. However, this sort of situation isn't something that can be reaped just by putting in a bit more effort. Each and every one of those fellows are thorns. If you put in too much effort, you might even have a rebellious mentality." Luo Nan laughed. "In the end, you just don't have confidence in my social skills." Xie Junping spoke with his conscience. "That's because you really don't have confidence. Also, you gave He Donglu such treatment. Don't let him get overly excited. He needs it." Luo Nan didn't say much. He changed the topic back. "It's fine to have a rebellious mentality. Let's put on the right attitude and speak the right words. Those who are willing to help are friends. Those who are deliberately causing trouble are enemies. In the end, public opinion on the internet is still fake. But these people are real before our eyes." Xie Junping was stupefied for a moment before replying. "That's true." Zhang Yingying furrowed her brows. "But this way, the matter with Rui Wen will have a reversal. Isn't relapsing normal?" Luo Nan didn't look worried at all. Instead, he had ample reasons. According to Rui Wen's opinion, she doesn't want things to stop. We should respect her choice. Everyone raised their eyebrows at his words. Chapter 1137. 5 minutes before 6 in the afternoon, Luo Nan didn't even change his clothes when he got home. He went back downstairs and greeted Mrs. Luo Shuqing, who was sitting on the sofa and observing public opinion online with a frown. "I have a party tonight, so I'll be home late. If it's too late, I might sleep outside." "Going out so soon after coming back? All right, be careful. You hear, what people say is not true." "Hey, I'm not talking about you." Mo Peng, who had just returned home from school, had a problem with the timing of his response. He incurred the cold gaze of his own mother on the spot. Then he thought about how his old man and sister weren't home tonight. Rui Wen wouldn't show herself either. He actually had to face Mrs. Luo Shuqing's monstrous pressure by himself. He lost the courage he had at home for a time. He hurried over with 2 steps and revealed a smile to Luo Nan. "I might as well go with you." "Sure. That? If you want to go, it's not a problem. This party is full of young people, there should be some fun." Mo Peng swore that he was just speaking thoughtlessly. He never thought that Luo Nan would actually take it seriously. Mo Peng wasn't an idiot. He didn't know what Luo Nan was busy with right now, but he was very certain that it was absolutely a major matter. The Xia city government's high privileges group definitely wasn't obtained by selling miserably. The reason why Luo Nan's mother didn't care about Luo Nan going out or even staying overnight outside was because she knew that Luo Nan was going to do proper business. Why had he followed her? Be in charge of acting cute? Mo Peng shrunk back, but Luo Nan grabbed him. "Don't run if you've already picked it up. Change your clothes and let's go out." "There's no need, right? I haven't finished my homework yet." The more Luo Nan spoke, the more guilty Mo Peng felt. Mo Peng was born with a fear of a strange environment. It even suppressed the accumulated power of his mother for a time. He simply raised his voice and used the method of self-detonation to ask for help. As expected, it attracted Luo Shuqing's attention. But Luo Nan was a step ahead. Sometimes social homework is more important than homework after school. Auntie, I'll go with Brother Pring. It's a gathering of people of the same age. There's no problem. The most important thing is for him to expand his social circle. There are some people and some things that are better known early on. Madame Luo Shuqing pondered for a moment. Luo Nan turned his head and spoke to Mo Peng in a low voice. This is related to Rui Wen's matter. You have to help out and take a look. Are you even more lacking in confidence than I am in this sort of social occasion? Luo Nan raised his voice in the second half of his sentence. Mo Peng was stupefied, forgetting to struggle. On the other side, Ms. Luo Shuqing made the decision. We can go, but you have to come back early. Sure. Luo Nan didn't have any interest in playing all night with this bunch of second-generation kids. He readily agreed and pushed Mo Peng. What are you scared for? It's not like this is a Hongmen banquet. Don't be a coward. Mo Peng had a legitimate reason, so he couldn't take it anymore. He pulled open his collar and said, What do you want to change into? Formal wear? No need. Just think of it as going tonight, Frost River reality. Before Mrs. Luo Shuqing could react, Luo Nan quickly changed his words. Tonight, Aunt, you can eat with Rui Wen. Chat with her. Don't worry, she's quite calm. By the time Mo Peng finished packing and left, it was already past 6:00. The two walked out of the community. The side door of a high-end business car opened in a parking space on the side of the road. He Donglu waved at them under the soft illumination of the interior. He had a radiant smile on his face. He didn't show any dissatisfaction from waiting for a long time. Luo Nan also laughed. Young He, sorry to keep you waiting. This is my older brother, Mo Peng. He's the same age as me. He Donglu's gaze shifted to Mo Peng. He laughed intimately. That's because he's younger than me. I'll just call him Pengzi. Come. Luckily I switched cars today. Just as He Donglu said, He Donglu didn't bring his daily ride when he came to pick up Luo Nan. Instead, he chose a relatively bulky business car. Aside from wanting Luo Nan to have a more comfortable ride, He Donglu also wanted to bring a few more people. Mo Peng greeted He Donglu with a bit of caution. He was just about to board the car when he suddenly froze in place. Luo Nan was in the back. He saw that aside from an unfamiliar young man, there was also a beautiful woman in the rear compartment. He recognized her. It was none other than the female celebrity, Shi Wei, who was at Mingtang Culture with Mo Ye. He didn't expect that He Donglu would bring Shi Wei over. He could only push Mo Peng into the car at this time. At the same time, he laughed. Miss Shi is here too. What a coincidence. Brother Peng is your loyal fan. He even asked me to get your autograph in the past. Luo Nan was hoping that Mo Peng wouldn't have a mental breakdown after he clearly saw the relationship between Shi Wei and He Donglu. Shi Wei was the type of person who had perfect communication skills. She waited for Mo Peng to sit down before she took the initiative to extend her hand. Her smile was like a flower. Mo Peng, right? Mo Ye's little brother. I remember that I did give you an autograph. We weren't familiar back then. Mr. Luo even asked my assistant for help. We're not strangers now. Just keep in touch in the future. Thank you, Sister Wei Wei. Fortunately, Mo Peng wasn't one of those fanatical fans of Shi Wei. His reaction was much more mature than what Luo Nan imagined. He extended his hand very carefully, using the tip of his finger to touch Shi Wei's finger to avoid his moist palm revealing the fact that he was overly nervous. Then he revealed a large smile. It really is Sister Wei Wei. I was just thinking about not going. In the end, the bus hasn't even left, and it's worth the price. Regardless of the quality of the joke, everyone in the car laughed. Both the host and the guest were happy for a time. The car started, and it went to the location of the gathering. Luo Nan's gaze fell upon the young and unfamiliar face in the car at this time. The latter's gaze also stared at him. It was quite fervent. He Donglu timely introduced. This is my younger cousin, He Dongliang. The reason I called him over is because he usually likes actual combat, so he has crossed paths with Chao Wu. Yeah, he seems to be more familiar with little 8 of the Chao family. Right. I'm very familiar with Chao Fong. We usually train together. Brother Chao Shu often sees us too. Brother-in-law, don't worry. Tonight Ouch. He Dongliang was overly excited, incurring He Donglo's attack on the spot. He Dongliang didn't finish his words, but he still drew Mo Peng's horrified gaze. Just kidding. He Donglu addressed Luonan as brother-in-law in front of his own family. There was no taboo in whether it was real or fake. In the end, he still needed a bit of face in front of Luonan. He Dongliang, this bastard, was even more worrisome than He Donglu. He Dongliang was truly a muddle-headed person. He managed to change the way he addressed Luonan with great difficulty under He Donglo's watchful gaze. He called Luonan senior apprentice brother without any head or tail. In the end, he changed to the more normal brother Luonan. Actually, He Dongliang was a bit older than Luonan and Mo Peng. He couldn't be bothered with it right now. Chao Shu, Chao Fong. Luonan checked the information in his mind before he understood what He Dongliang meant by Chao Fong. Chao Fong corresponded to little 8 of the Chao family's younger generation, and Chao Shu was Chao Wu, who had triggered today's gathering. Xie Junping called He Donglu over. Sure enough, it was useful. Similar friendships were connected in circles. He Donglu casually chatted about a few things. Compared to Dongliang, this muddle-headed kid, and Chao Wu, little 8 of the Chao family is the real deal. He enlisted in the military last year and has been training in the military. Moreover, he's not in the Xia City Closed Defense Army, but the Aerial Army. He's even more amazing than the one from the Chao family. Rumor has it that he'll be moving to Europa FOB soon. It's not moving. It's selecting. He Dongliang boasted for his friend. This batch of people is special. They're selecting the cream of the crop because Lieutenant General Joseph is about to return to Earth to debrief. Rumor has it that this batch of people will be personally selected by him. Some will even be directly added to his personal guard. It's a one-for-one operation. The number of people that go in will be the number of people that come out of the guard. Luonan raised an eyebrow. Lieutenant General Joseph. Of course Luonan knew of him. He was an extraordinary with an awe-inspiring reputation in the inner world. He was a powerful person like a stabilizing force in the military. He didn't participate in the Summit Round Table Conference last time, but he still retained his seat. Luonan casually asked, "Why?" "You should know, Nanster." In this environment, He Donglo's way of addressing Luonan became all the more intimate. This time, the members of the guard that Lieutenant General Joseph brought back are all going to undergo a major update of the Deep Blue platform. Whether it's the Dynamo Core or something else, they are limited by their aptitude and hardware. Some people are bound to be eliminated. That's right. One wave was eliminated and another wave was promoted. In the end, it was still the Deep Blue platform system. This was an even deeper binding. Luonan went silent. Beside him, Mo Peng had absorbed too much information all at once. He was still in a daze. He wanted to open his mouth a few times to ask questions, but he forcefully held himself back. He just lowered his head and searched for keywords on the internet through his wristband. Whether it was useful or not, his mental fortitude was commendable. As for how his heart was in turmoil, that was another matter altogether. Luonan's gaze circled around Mo Peng's body. Pulling Mo Peng over to participate in tonight's gathering was indeed a spur-of-the-moment idea, but the thoughts that pushed him to make this decision had been brewing in his heart for some time. The participants of tonight's gathering were all young people. Mo Peng's fitting in was just the most superficial reason. The most fundamental reason was this: Mo Peng should be allowed to join this circle. From Luonan's perspective, this group of second and third generation students was just that. But it was still much more expansive than the pure student circle. Of course, it was also much more chaotic. It was a springboard that led to an even vaster world. It was the shallow waters on the way to the deep sea. Emopeng might not be happy right now, but Luonan had kicked him in the back. This was because that vast world, that deep sea, wasn't something that could be isolated forever just because you didn't touch it. They were here. It was just that there was a fuzzy barrier of information sandwiched in the middle. It gave people the misconception that they were far away or that they weren't related. So much so that Luonan didn't even need to use any additional power. Just Luonan's position, the environment he faced, and the waves stirred up by his every move were enough to erase this barrier of nothingness. The future incidents, at the very least, would be a storm of information brought about by a series of incidents. It was destined to involve his family members. It was just a matter of how much, and it wouldn't change according to Luonan's will. Since this was the case, why not do it a bit earlier? Chapter 1138. Luonan was certain that his way of thinking had changed. In the past, he would have probably. In fact, he would have adopted a more conservative strategy, isolating his aunt's family from the flow of information related to the inner world. He only wanted to distance his family from those messy matters so that they wouldn't have to worry about them. As it turned out, this kind of conservative strategy was useless. As Luonan's status in the inner world rose with the tide, his influence over the various powers grew greater and greater. Under the influence of the various powers, the man-made dam of information became extremely weak. The flood overflowed the dike, and Luonan's aunt's family would still know what they needed to know. Not to mention the fact that the global census, Rue Wen's matter, 10 days in the wilderness and other matters, both overt and covert, were piled up together. A considerable portion of them had already seeped into his family's lives, and he couldn't stop them even if he wanted to. Of course, Luonan's way of thinking had changed, so he wasn't that passive. He speculated that the key factor that led to his transformation seemed to be the perception system of the magneto-optical mica that was completely different from that of humans. After observing and thinking about it for a long time, he became increasingly certain. Perception, experience, breadth and depth of experience, as well as the corresponding thinking ability, were crucial to the growth and evolution of life. In the era of rapid change in the future, the information masking caused by excessive protection, as well as the corresponding problems such as underdevelopment and inability to evolve, might cause even greater damage than facing difficulties and disasters. There were a few people in the family. After all, uncle and aunt were adult. They had gone through the storm with grandpa in their early years, so they were mentally prepared and had experience. Emoya had been in an underground band for the past few years and was still in the entertainment industry. She had seen a lot of things and knew a little about the situation, so there was no need to worry. The remaining one was Emopeng. His age was about the same as Luonan's, and he was in the circle of ordinary students. He was probably the one with the worst endurance when faced with the sudden storm of information and sudden changes in the environment. Of course, he was also the one who needed to be reformed the most. As for not being used to it, he would eventually get used to it. No matter how uncomfortable it was better than being muddle-headed when the time came. Emopeng was like this, and so were his relatives. By extension, it was the same for all living beings on Earth. An even more complicated problem was waiting for him ahead. Luonan habitually entered a long examination mode. The MPV carrying them was also moving forward steadily. The normal magnetic rail load was limited. Medium to large vehicles like this would automatically adjust to the bus lane, which was relatively smoother. Moreover, the interior design of this high-class business car was excellent. The aircraft-grade business seats were very comfortable. The starry sky roof, which had been worn out on luxury cars, felt pretty good if one didn't look closely. Everything was quite appropriate, but Luo Nan did not speak. The atmosphere here was a bit strange. In such a situation, Shi Wei's value was highlighted. Using her advantage as a woman, she took the initiative to break the silence. Mr. Luo, before I came, I heard from young Master Lu that tonight's gathering is because of Rue Wen. Luo Nan came back to his senses and nodded. Yes. Is he trying to build up his current popularity? It's such a pity. As a member of the entertainment industry, Shi Wei instinctively pursued popularity and traffic. No. It's the exact opposite. Rue Wen and I both need popularity. Luo Nan gave a clear answer. He didn't mind having an exchange with this female celebrity. Shi Wei subconsciously glanced at He Donglu beside her. This was different from the information she had received earlier. He Donglu was also very surprised. Didn't we let Chao Wu and the others manage those resources? There's a follow-up? I'm considering. Luo Nan was just about to say something when a call came in. He looked at the caller ID, raised his hand slightly, and immediately connected the call. Leicester? Shui Lei's sigh came from the other side, along with a large amount of noise. You guys haven't arrived yet? Aside from Brother Ping, I don't recognize a single person here. Shui Lei was in a rather crucial stage of his cultivation during this period of time. He usually lived in seclusion, cultivating his energy with concentration. Luo Nan had called him over tonight in consideration of Chao Wu's circle. Everyone was a fan of actual combat. Having a professional would make things easier. It seemed that this sort of scene was still, it doesn't matter. Everyone will know each other after a round of flashing fists. Xie Juanping's voice suddenly rushed in. It was raised quite high, followed by roaring laughter. It looked like the atmosphere was quite good. There was even someone shouting, I don't accept this. Why are we playing in virtual reality? Has the iron cage been set up yet? It's starting this early? He Donglu heard these sounds from the car and felt a bit baffled. Gatherings of young people like them usually only officially started after 9 or 10 o'clock. Sometimes, they didn't even enter the main topic until after midnight. The grand banquet at the end of last year was like this. Before this, everyone just met, got to know each other, chatted, and at most played a few warm-up games. Now it looked like the atmosphere had exploded ahead of time. Old C, go a bit faster. The bodyguard Old C, who was temporarily acting as the driver, responded and increased the speed of the car. Shui Lei wasn't quite used to the atmosphere over there. He gave a couple of laughs and hid in a secluded place to continue his conversation with Luo Nan. It's been a long time since I've participated in this sort of event. I'm inexplicably scared and jumpy when I go in. I heard that you're really going to let Rue Wen debut? What do you mean? Then what does it mean that she wants to become a public figure? When did she clearly say that she wants to become a public figure? It's just that I think it's like this. Then why don't you just let her debut? I'm not saying this, but this is adding fuel to the fire. The current situation is delicate. If we put on the posture of a victim and act low-key, we can accumulate a bit of sympathy on the internet. But if we take advantage of the situation to debut, many people will really hype this matter. Our reputation won't be good. Besides, the public has a different set of standards for people in the entertainment circle. Luo Nan swept a glance at Shi Wei and responded with a smile. I know this. Fortunately, Shui Lei didn't participate in the video conference in the afternoon. Otherwise, he would have known that Bamboo Pole, Zhang Yingying, and Papercut had already said all of this more than once. Shui Lei even painstakingly analyzed, your family already has Sister Mo Ye mingling in the entertainment circle. There's a bit of mystery in having a band. But with Rue Wen's current situation, she'll be at the top of Xia City for a short period of time as soon as she makes her debut. Will your family be able to endure that kind of harassment? Are you still going to do your great global census plan? Of course I'm going to do it. Of course I'm going to do it. Luo Nan's response grew more and more straightforward. These two matters don't conflict. This is the effect I want. Shuele hung up the phone in confusion. Luo Nan's attitude was very clear, but the reason for forming this attitude was hard for his friends to fathom. Luo Nan knew everyone's confusion. His mind was clear, but he was unable to explain it too clearly. Could it be that he wanted to tell everyone? Rue Wen wanted to look in a mirror. However, normal people used polished lenses, while Rue Wen used the multicolored hearts of people. Luo Nan pretty much did the same. The difference was that his Luo Nan ruler was a kind of active projection. It was established upon a relatively clear understanding of himself. It was a crowbar that pierced into the depths of the thoughts of millions and millions of living beings, prying and gathering the chaotic power within the sea of consciousness. As for Rue Wen, she was a child with only 2 or 3 years of memories. Deep within her heart, she didn't have a particularly clear understanding of herself. Instead, she needed to go outside. She needed to go through round after round of projection to piece together a relatively complete version of herself. This was Luo Nan's guess. This was very likely to be a useless effort. This was because Rue Wen's image in the hearts of the masses had long since been grotesque and dazzling. She was greatly distorted. Of course, from Rue Wen's inconceivable talent, this little girl might possess a complete set of identification and integration methods that Luo Nan didn't know of. The target of her clairvoyance might not be as simple as the chaotic hearts of people behind the internet rumors. At the very least, a similar possibility couldn't be eliminated. Luo Nan, who had borrowed the special perceptual mode of the magnetite mica, could understand this point, but he was unable to feel it. And because of this, Luo Nan didn't know where to start persuading Rue Wen. He could only strive to create conditions for her. In addition, Luo Nan had his own considerations, but they were still a bit chaotic and unformed. After hanging up the phone, Luo Nan pondered for a bit too long. In the end, it was Shi Wei who took the initiative to talk to him. Mr. Luo, according to what you're saying, Miss Rue Wen wants to be a public figure, right? Not only are we not suppressing her popularity, but we're also going to form some sort of direction? Luo Nan thought for a bit. To be precise, we're going to do our best to appear in the eyes of the public, but we're going to pull away from commercialization. I haven't thought of the specifics yet. Shi Wei's brows furrowed. A voluntary public figure? And non-commercialization? That's about the plan. Shi Wei hooked the corner of her lips. If we don't walk the commercial path, public opinion and social activism are fine, but Miss Rue Wen's age and identity aren't suitable. It's fine to do a live broadcast, but this kind of model, especially one that eliminates commercialization and adopts the form of personal expression, will find it very hard to win the favor of the public. I'm talking about the positive reaction. He Donglu nudged Shi Wei lightly. He felt that these words were a bit too direct. Luo Nan faintly felt that it was his request to be non-commercialized that gave Shi Wei a bit of stimulation. In fact, due to the existence and effect of Luo Nanqi, every word and action of his, even the radiation of his emotions, was very likely to amplify the reception and reaction of others. Especially for Shi Wei, who was a social butterfly with a sharp and sensitive mind. Luo Nan obviously didn't mind. And from a rational perspective, there weren't any problems with Shi Wei's expression. He responded with a smile. Sister Weiwei, you're more professional than us in this field. I was just about to ask for your opinion. Sister Weiwei, copied from Mo Peng, made Shi Wei's mind feel at ease. She soon realized that her dissatisfaction from being mocked came without reason. Her smile grew all the more bright and beautiful. Mr. Luo, you praise me too much. I'm muddle-headed in this circle. I can't be considered a professional. I can only say that I'm parroting. I'll give you an idea for your reference. Please speak. Please speak. I'm all ears. Luo Nan's smile was warm, causing the atmosphere in the car to become all the more harmonious and relaxed.